What event caused a real-life butterfly effect for you? My mother wore heels to work and slipped on the carpeted steps, resulting in a broken high heel and a broken leg. While she was home recovering, she somehow developed allergies that led to her needing an inhaler to dose herself with penicillin. The inhaler interfered with her birth control, and now I have a brother 13 years younger than me. Nearly every single friend I have in college is because one day in my Gen Ed health class, we had to pick a seat that would become our seat for the semester. When I came in, there weren't many seats left, and the people I sat next to ended up becoming my best friends and introduced me to all of my other friends in one way or another. I'm alive because my aunt was born. My grandfather was conscripted into the Romanian army as a medic, and his unit was one of the many acting as a defensive barrier covering the German supply lines to Stalingrad. My aunt was born and he was called back to Bucharest from the front. While he was on leave, the Russians launched Operation Uranus, which decimated the Axis forces. He received word that his unit had been completely destroyed. He was never reassigned, and in 1948, my mother was born. I'm also alive because a bunch of Romanian cows got sick. My other grandfather was a pharmacist, back when that meant actually making medicines, and he was also Jewish. The town he lived in was largely agrarian, and their cow herds came down with some illness that was killing them. He whipped up something that cured them. The townspeople were very grateful to him. So grateful that when the chief of police heard that the Germans were coming to town to take inventory of who lived there, he came to my grandfather's house with some train tickets for him and his wife. They escaped the Third Reich and never got caught. My father was born at the end of 1945. Actually, you know what? I guess this is the opposite of the butterfly effect. Rather than one small action blowing up into a much more important chain of events, two hugely improbable events eventually led to my birth and obviously my extended family as well. And now, well, I work running ads on the internet. I was going out to grab pizza and a case of beer for me and my roommate, but he texted me that he had a stomach thing, so I walked to a restaurant and ordered dinner at the bar and met a girl there. And now we're married and have 2 kids because my roommate had diarrhea. I can totally see a child telling the short version of this story to someone who doesn't really care, but the kid just hears it and repeats, "My dad married my mom because his roommate has diarrhea." That is clearly the best and only way to describe how they met. Children are the best at getting to the heart of these sorts of things. If only the best man at their wedding had given that specific speech. So my then girlfriend and now wife were planning on going away traveling for a very long time. Several years, in fact. The night before we left, I was just packing my things, and at the last minute I decided to include some camera stuff. I had an SLR that I didn't really use too much. I very nearly didn't bring it because it was big and space was at a premium. While we were away, one of the things that we did was work in a wildlife rehab center. At the time we were there, it was very quiet, very few baby kangaroos to look after. But we had to be ready as that could change in an instant. Like, in one day, 3 could come in and boom, full-time job. I used my spare time to really get to grips with the camera and learn about photography in general. Now, I'm a wildlife cameraman. Had I decided to leave my camera, I'd never be doing what I'm doing, which is sitting in a freezing cold shed for hours at a time, waiting for some animals to do something that they're not doing. High school. I didn't get into the advanced placement history class I wanted, changed up my schedule, including a different gym class without everyone I knew. I was heartbroken. I really wanted to teach, and without an AP class senior year, I was screwed. I made a new friend in gym class who was wearing a volunteer firefighter shirt. He had just joined. Seemed interesting and he invited me to check it out. They paid for me to get my EMT. I fell in love with healthcare. Fast forward quite a bit and I'm an ER nurse and precept students and new nurses, teaching them how to survive in the ER. I also do public outreach and injury prevention, and I love it. I'm glad I missed out on my AP history class. If my biological mum hadn't asked her parents to watch me for a couple of hours and then left town, I wouldn't have had the incredible and privileged life that I was given through adoption. My younger half-brothers were raised by our biological mum and they're a total frickin' mess. I'm more of a mum to them than their actual mum, and I would have been an absolute wreck as well if she'd kept me. Instead, I was given an amazing private education, all the sports and musical adventures, and most importantly, a healthy, loving home with 2 parents who taught me that just because you share blood doesn't mean you share love, and just because you didn't give birth to a child doesn't mean you can't be their parent. The wife and I were having dinner in Hawaii one night on vacation. As we were getting up to leave, I noticed she hadn't finished her beer. I told her she should finish the beer since we paid some ridiculous price for it. Fast forward 30 seconds and we leave the restaurant and we're walking the 3 blocks back to the hotel. About 50 feet in front of us as we're walking down the sidewalk on the left side of the road, a car comes flying out of a side street from the right and crashes through the street, hops the sidewalk in front of us and smashes into a wall. If she didn't finish her beer, we would have been smoked by the car and most likely squished between the car and the wall. We always finish our beer now. If you hadn't drank at all, you could have had an action movie scene with a car crashing behind you as you casually walked down the street. I mean, it's only cool if the car explodes afterwards. I was walking to school and got distracted by a hedgehog that ran into a bush next to me, and then a big tree branch fell in front of me and would have crushed me if I didn't get distracted by that spiky little mouse scurrying into the bushes. I gave him a dead cricket the next day and he took it and ran off. Godspeed, spiky mouse. At the end of 6th grade, my class took a field trip on whale watch. That night I saw a commercial for a documentary TV series on whales. Ever since that day I wanted to grow up and protect whales from being hunted. Today I work in the military specializing in marine preservation. Cool! I didn't even know the military worked in marine preservation. My brother spent a career as a Navy corpsman, a medic, and for 23 years of his life he was trying to preserve Marines from their own stupidity. Everything from bullet wounds and major contusions to heart attacks to venereal disease. As it was with the Marines, I suspect there were a few cases of crayon poisoning and more than one marble up the nose too. The Navy definitely invests in marine preservation. Getting my ears pierced the day after I graduated high school got me where I am today. I worked at McDonald's at the time and was scheduled to work that night. Before my shift, my girlfriend at the time convinced me to get my ears pierced. Well, when I showed up to my shift with those clear ear studs in, my manager gave me an option: either take them out or go home. Being only 17 and not taking anything seriously, I went home. On the way home, I called that girlfriend's dad and asked if I could work with him laying tile. He gave me a chance, and I quit McDonald's that day. Worked with him for about a year until the 2008-09 recession caused us to run out of work. I got laid off. 4 months later, I landed a job in a new hospital doing admitting in the emergency room. Did that for 2 years before I got my phlebotomy certification. Been doing that for a few years and now I'm in my final semester of nursing school. I attribute everything I've done to that day my ex-girlfriend pressured me into getting my ears pierced. Who knows how long I would have stayed at McDonald's. Received an incredibly high-paying job offer to run our biggest competitor's team. I told my boss, even though I loved my job, but it was more than double what I was making. My boss agreed to a reasonable raise, still nowhere near the offer. I decided to stay because I genuinely loved my team and co-workers, and the money wasn't enough to leave that happy place. In exchange, I had to take up another account that meant a business trip I didn't have in the plans. I went on that trip and met my future husband. A couple of years later, we went on our honeymoon at a new resort in St. Lucia. Ran into someone I knew from home and work. Turns out, the team that I'd been given the job offer for had made so much money that they'd booked the same resort to celebrate. I sat there and went, wow, life is nuts. I would have ended up there either way. Well, this might be the opposite of what we were asking here, as apparently no matter if you'd chosen to quit both jobs and throw your life into turmoil, you were destined to meet your partner and be in that exact resort at the exact same time. Sweet though. In short, I was just out of high school and new in town with no job. I was living off what savings I had left, and my account went below zero without me knowing. I was overdraft charged like 10 times and I owed $300. I went down to the bank and spoke with a teller, and she ended up being a lifesaver. She worked with me and got all the charges removed. On top of getting the charges removed, we got to talking about my situation, and she said that her son worked at a local restaurant and she had helped me get a job. She was a woman of her word, and by the end of the week I was working full-time. Fast forward, I met a cool dude who worked there, we became friends. I introduced him to my sister, they fell in love, got married, and had 2 kids. His best friend came into town for the wedding, and I introduced him to my roommate at the time. They fell in love, got married, and had 2 babies. I also got my best friend a job at the restaurant where he met a girl working there. They fell in love, got married, and had a kid. Right before I left, I got my roommate a job at the restaurant where he met a customer, fell in love, got married, and had a kid. As a bonus, my best friend, who I helped get the job, repaid the favor and got me a job at a different restaurant where I met a girl, fell in love, and got married. In short, I overdrafted and caused 5 marriages and 6 babies. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Went to a soccer match on a Thursday night in August 2010, after years of turning down invites from multiple groups of friends. But this time it was for someone's birthday and they gave me a ticket, so I said, what the hell, okay. I fell in love with my local team. I'd watched soccer in high school and college and of course the World Cup, but this was different. I rekindled friendships from years before through our mutual support of said team. Made new friends, experienced new things because of friends and the team, drank more than I usually did. In January 2016, I got laid off from a job I'd grown to hate after 8 years and a lot of rounds of layabouts, just waiting for my number to be called. That March, I was getting antsy and bored at home because I was trying to save money while still looking for work, and decided to get off my couch and go to an off-season supporters group meeting, which I usually don't like to do because I'm not good at social skills, and if I hadn't been unemployed, I know I wouldn't have gone. But that night I met the woman I instantly knew I was going to fall in love with. I got a new job, quit drinking, finally went on a date with her 6 months after meeting her, figured out I hated the new job, quit said job, moved to her city 35 minutes south in 2017, and have been working odd jobs part-time and doing gig economy stuff. I moved in 6 months later. We had a puppy magically fall into our lives within 3 days of just talking about maybe getting a dog, and it's my first dog ever and I'm so happy about it. Got engaged, got married in December, and I'm so happy. We also just got a kitten. I don't know if this counts, but during the Sri Lankan Civil War, my dad and his family were chased out of their home and were forced to seek shelter at his cousin's house a couple of towns over. His cousins only had one neighbor, and that neighbor was my mum and her family. They used to meet up at the fence dividing their lawns and talk for months. One of the pictures from their wedding was them at that fence. When I was 18, I had a girlfriend, and her older brother owned a small company. He said to me, I think you'd be pretty good at this job. I'm 34 now and have a legitimate career that I love because I dated a girl for a bit. I also had a cat for the better part of that time period because of the girlfriend. I'm a cat person now. This happened 2 days ago. It was early in the morning, and as I was about to leave for work, my mum reminded me that I forgot my water bottle on the table while I was walking out. For whatever reason, I decided to go back, leave my backpack in the car, and then walk back into the house for the water bottle. Well, that took about maybe 10 seconds total. It started to rain heavily on my way to work and I couldn't see very well. But I noticed the brake lights of the cars ahead stopping suddenly and some moving off onto the shoulder and decided to slow down and put the hazard lights on for the people behind to slow down. Well, turns out everyone was braking because a 4 or 5 car accident had just happened seconds before. All the cars were scattered across the highway, spread across the left and right shoulders, and another had hit the crash barrier. Basically a total mess. The drivers were still in their cars, I guess processing what had just happened. After seeing it, I immediately started to think that if I hadn't gone back for the water bottle, there's a chance I could have easily been in that accident, or at least even closer to it. It tripped me out for the rest of the day. The crazy thing about random variables is had you actually been at the point where the accident occurred, you might have been the one element that stopped it or at least saved someone from a wreck. Maybe you're more attentive than the other drivers and gave enough warning? I guess we'll never know, and really, I blame that accident on your water bottle. Almost everything that's happened in my life for the past 8 years is a direct result of me literally flipping a coin to decide between 2 colleges. I play the sport I do, have the friends I do, and am dating the person I am and very nearly every other aspect of my life because a nickel landed on heads. Alright there, Harvey Dent. I should say to everyone watching, please don't make every choice in your life based on random chance. Only resort to it like this if the 2 colleges are completely, absolutely equally appealing to you. Then, after the proper research and forethought, why the heck not flip a coin, I guess. I procrastinated one day in high school by watching a foreign musical on YouTube. I ended up trying to learn the lyrics and eventually the language. That led to me discovering the field of linguistics, which I'm now majoring in. I don't know what I'd be doing now had I actually started doing my homework that day instead. Just last month, a friend of mine told me a story from his recent heartbreak. He, let's call him Mickey, had been with this girl Minnie for almost 4 years when, out of nowhere, she told him she was leaving him and moving out. He had no idea the relationship was in jeopardy, but she dipped. Anyway, a few weeks went by, Mickey was hanging out with a co-worker of his who he had just recently met and ends up back at his place just to hang out. On the fridge, he sees a note in Minnie's handwriting. The note detailed several issues in Mickey and Minnie's relationship, and so Mickey asks his new friend where he found this note. Turns out this new buddy had gone to the same music festival as Mickey and Minnie a few months prior. The friend had found the note on the ground on the parking lot and thought, wow, what a sad and angry note. I'm going to keep this because it's so raw and interesting. The next day, Minnie came over to pick up some of her things. Mickey produced the note and it led to a long, tear-filled conversation about their relationship and what went wrong. They didn't end up together because, despite the pseudonyms I've given them, this is no Disney story. However, the resulting discussion helped them both achieve closure in a meaningful way, all because a random coworker kept and found a discarded note in a festival parking lot. I suffered with sack pain for a week or so to save a life. When I was a kid, my family went from the UK to visit my auntie who worked as a nurse in Germany. Being obsessed with Lego at the time, I was excited to be getting to go to the original Legoland in Denmark on the Friday of the week for the weekend. Cue waking up to crippling pain in my groin early in the week. After assuming it was just strain and waiting a few days, on Thursday I was given the choice of going to Denmark the next day or heading to the hospital and staying. I chose the hospital since I was in that much pain. Turns out there wasn't anything to do but take painkillers and chill. When it got round to the Saturday, my aunt went out to get me some Lego to cheer me up. Her and my brother stopped at a swimming pool for a while on the way back, where she was throwing some of those weight toys that they got from the toy store into the pool for him to dive down and get. Some German teenagers were taking the toys, so my auntie tried to shout at them in broken German. So they left to a deserted part of the pool. Next minute, they pull out a toddler from the pool completely unconscious. The lifeguards apparently had no clue what they were doing and were trying to call an ambulance, so my aunt stepped in and performed CPR until the kid got airlifted to a hospital. A week or so later, my pain had subsided, so we headed back to the pool. A woman came over to ask for some chairs in German, and my mum said, "Sorry, we're English." And the woman asked in English instead. She turned back around and said, "You wouldn't by any chance happen to know the English nurse that saved a little boy last week?" And my mum replied, "Yes, it's my sister." The woman said it was all over the local news that this anonymous English nurse saved the boy's life, and she wouldn't have been in the country if we were in Denmark at the time, let alone be at the pool sending away the teens to find the kid and then saving him. I still have never felt more glad to get a pain in my nads. When I was at college, I had this buddy who I used to give a ride to and from campus each day because we lived a couple of streets apart. One morning, I got Goldfinger, the ska band, not the Bond movie, playing on my CD player in my car. He had never heard them before, really dug it, and asked me about them. It was the day before Easter break, and he was all like, "Cool, I'll check them out." Cut to 2 weeks later, he's telling me how he's bought all their records, got his long-distance girlfriend into them when he visited her, and has basically listened to nothing but them since we spoke about it. I felt good for helping a buddy discover his new favorite band, but thought nothing more of it. That summer, me and this dude have a falling out. Long story, but the short of it is that he screwed me out of nearly £1,000, and a bit later I stopped seeing him around. After a while, a mutual friend told me he'd dropped out and moved away. The next summer, a friend of mine asks me if I want a ticket to see Real Big Fish that evening. His sister was supposed to go, but is really sick and can't. I say, sure, and tag along. We get there and it turns out the support band is Goldfinger, which is pretty cool. So we're standing there, having a beer in between bands, and I clumsily knock some girl who's walking past's drink out of her hand. I turn and apologize and offer to buy her a replacement. While we're waiting at the bar, we get to talking and we're getting on pretty well. Me and my friend end up hanging out with her and her sisters the whole night, having a great time, and me and this girl end up exchanging numbers. Cut forward again a couple of years, me and said girl have been together basically since that night. We're moving in together and it's going really great. The night we move in together, we're sitting amongst all of our boxes of crap on the only seats that are unpacked, and I say something like, "Imagine if I hadn't taken my friend's offer to go to that Real Big Fish show that night. We'd have never met." She's then like, "Not only that, imagine if you hadn't bumped into me and we hadn't got to talking. Our original plan that night was to leave after Goldfinger played, as they were the only band we were bothered about seeing." I commented something about how I really liked them or something, I forget what, and then I asked how she got into them. I'm paraphrasing, but the long and short of it was, "Oh, my sister got me into them. Her D-bag ex-boyfriend got her into them. They were long distance while she studied in the US. They used to go to shows together when he would visit. He's actually from round here, I think." Yep. Same dude that I used to give rides to. Bonus butterfly effect, my buddy who was with me at that show actually ended up marrying the sister in question last year. In short, managed to set myself and a buddy up with serious relationships just by introducing some random dude who I used to give a ride to school to a band that I liked. When did you realize, I'm in a cult? I dated a girl in high school who was a total freak in the bedroom, so when she pressured me into going to church with her, it was hard to say no. First red flag was when they called me Brother Braniel as an introduction. Second red flag was when everyone started yelling gibberish and jumping around. Third red flag was when they brought out the snakes. I actually got some pretty harsh looks because I didn't start talking gibberish and jumping around. It was definitely a case of, you're here, this is what you do, peer pressure. So that's how I visited a snake-handling Holiness, Alabama backwater church. My college friend invited me to a service at her new church. Later told me that the, quote, church met in a barn and they spent their last service literally vomiting up their demons. 50 or so people just wholly vomiting all at once. I went to my 20th reunion 5 years ago, and the woman who organized it I've known since 3rd grade. Very nice, smart, charismatic, the whole package, and she told me about her self-help and life coaching company. I said that sounds cool and maybe I could benefit. So she said she would hook it up later. I live in LA, and when I got back I had an email introducing me to her colleague, whose email domain was esplosangeles.com, which sounded weird. A quick trip to their webpage and a Google search, and I found out she was trying to get me to join NXIVM, which is now all over the news. Google NXIVM, all caps by the way, and steal yourself. I noped right out of there, and I'm glad I did, as a bunch of them are going to jail now. The therapeutic boarding school Elan. The first night I got there, everyone told me how I'd get used to everything. And I did. I fell into their trap. I didn't realize how messed up it was until the school got shut down by the FBI and the owner got charged with child endangerment and inappropriate behavior with a student. I got invited to a business meeting for a life insurance company. My wife was looking for business connections and trying to get referrals to her company, so we went along. It was a multi-level marketing life insurance company. It was such a creepy, culty place. Everyone with fake serial killer smiles, constantly talking about how much money they're making. The worst part was the other guests around us were nodding their heads in agreement, taking in the bullcrap hook, line, and sinker. My wife and I just looked at each other, left, and stopped answering that guy's phone calls. We had actually signed up for some insurance through them when we thought it was a normal company. We immediately cancelled and signed up with a real big-name insurance company. The narrator was honestly making bets with himself on when the first multi-level marketing scheme would appear. And in case you're questioning whether they really count, perhaps not religiously, but look at how they acquire and keep their members, and then Google how modern cults do it. The methods are remarkably similar. And just like cults, they tend to destroy regular people's lives. Actually, there was a great discussion about such organizations shortly after. Here it is. My now ex-boyfriend said he signed up for a professional and personal development course. I realized it was a cult when he came back with no personality and a whole new set of esoteric jargon. And any questions I had about it were rebuffed. What, you think it's a cult or something? I mean, you know Apple is considered a cult too, right? I find it interesting that most newer cults aren't really religious. The old doomsday, God's gonna getcha things are a lot rarer. Now it's just a bunch of self-help crap that doesn't even pretend to be about anything other than success. I can't tell if this is worse or better. Which makes lots of money. I think cults today are more about making lots of money off desperate people than they are about gods or the alien spaceship coming. My school's National Honor Society induction involved all of the inductees crowding in a dark room and chanting the National Honor Society pledge while holding candles. I was at a cafe one time and a guy was giving a multi-level marketing pitch to this girl who was buying it hook, line, and sinker. I listened to his pitch for about 1.5 hours. I was working on a paper and he was talking so loudly, and it took that long to figure out what they were selling. It was insurance. He'd already talked about how uplines work, the money structure, promise of making 6 figures a year, and he hadn't even mentioned exactly what they were selling. I work for an insurance company, and I was waiting for a moment for him to get up to go to the bathroom or something, so I could warn her that this was an MLM cult and no reputable insurance company runs this way. But after 3 hours, I got tired of waiting and left. Best of luck with your new lifestyle, lady. I went to a small women's college in Virginia. I only stayed a semester because of the group mentality. They would have constant rituals that were not technically mandatory, but you were weird if you didn't go. One alone wasn't weird, but collectively it was too much. For example, one Founders Day, everyone wore white. We went to the chapel for the ceremony and then walked 2 miles to the graveyard where the founders were buried. We all had to lay roses on the graves and sing the school's song. 4 girls in my class tried to self-delete in the first semester, and my class only had 64 girls. If you discussed transferring, then the dean of the students and the school's counselor would threaten to have you put in a mental hospital for 72 hours. I transferred in secret so no one would find out. I didn't even tell my friends. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. and transfer stuff from my dorm room to be shipped home. In short, went to a women's college, and if you didn't conform, the dean of the students would threaten to put you in a mental institution. I was looking into franchise businesses a while back, and one place offered me the chance to buy in and become a business coach. They had me take aptitude tests, went over my work history, and said that I'd be perfect with my business background. I went to meet them with a group of other potential franchisees at a presentation in a hotel, common for all franchise businesses, and I was like, what the frick? This is a multi-level marketing scheme. The other people there had next to no business experience, and all they were telling us was that we had to find our clients to coach and then read them a script off an iPad app. What's scary is that they're an actual registered franchise business. I'm not going to say that the script they had didn't have useful things that actually could have helped a small business, mainly because I would have to pony up around $100,000 just to see it. Every other franchise I spoke to and turned down, like a food or educational chain, were extremely polite and said, "Best of luck to you." These guys just cut off all contact with me, and I heard later through my franchise broker they were angry. When my Latin club sacrificed a stuffed animal before finals to pray to the gods for good grades. "But sir, the oracle at Delphi clearly predicted that I would score an 87%. You are either mistaken in your grading or intentionally undermining the sacred rights of the gods at Delphi." Had a pretty crappy sales position selling TV and internet in retail stores. It was impulse sales, meaning you're trying to get people to sign up for 2 years of something they just learned about 5 minutes ago. Anyways, there was a ton of rejection, but it was a full commission gig, so you stayed in the field until you closed. Therefore, it required a crap ton of effort and seemingly unending optimism and confidence. Anyways, every morning you'd get fired up with cheers and chants and other activities that involved yelling and team building. This also resulted in there being 10,000 sayings recycled on the daily about sticking through it and taking control of your destiny. Anyway, you buy into the system and the energy, and that's how they get you. One night I was driving home a coworker, and you pay for your own gas, another sweet perk, and he found an article, "Why the company is like a cult." And though he was laughing on the outside, this guy 100% brought it up to be like, this stuff is crazy, right? Needless to say, the article was spot on and he didn't last much longer, and I quit soon after that. After reading that, the narrator is realizing that a door-to-door salesman job he worked just after he finished high school was, if not an actual cult, then kind of cult-adjacent. Right down to the chants we did to get hyped. Luckily, I was so bad at it that I had to leave and go back on unemployment for a bit longer until I found my first actual job in a cafe. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was in middle school, a Jehovah's Witness family showed up and enrolled their kids in public school. One of them, a fairly attractive boy, started flirting with me. I'd always been that weird girl in school, so I obviously fell for him. He told me he wasn't allowed to date per se, but he was allowed to invite people to his church, and if I went with him, we could hang out and it would be just like a date. So I went with him, and that day we were talking about how if you join the church, you cannot speak with apostates or any of your family who aren't witnesses. I knew enough about cults for that to be a big red flag. I was still interested in him though. When he asked me to go again, I politely declined because churchy stuff had never been my speed. Instead, I suggested we sneak out one night and meet. He did, and I used my allowance to get us tickets to some movie. I didn't see him for years after that. His family just vanished. The next time I saw him, it was in a mall. I went up and said hi, only for his grandmother to yank him away, snarling not to speak with, "That filthy hussy." I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but I think he was only allowed to flirt with me because they were trying to convert me and my family. In my community, we were pretty well known. My father was the fire chief, and in a small town like this, that's a big deal. I still wonder what happened to that guy, though. I once went to my friend's Scentsy party. It was so uncomfortable. I hate scented candles and all that crap. I get headaches from a lot of fragrances, and I have a terrible sense of smell, so I'm really not the target market for Scentsy. Every woman at the party would ooh and ah at each scent. I was pretty indifferent to all of them, and I really didn't want to spend $50 on a candle. But there was so much pressure that I just brought a wax warmer and got the heck out. Never again. I realized I was in a cult after I entered the Oculus Quest subreddit. I was having a crisis of faith in college, and my friend invited me to a megachurch her family sometimes visited. She was singing its praises, talking about how supportive, friendly, and progressive it was. She swore this place would speak to me. One of the issues I had with religion was how old-fashioned it was, how things didn't change with the times, so progressive sounded great. We got there for the 11 a.m. service. There were like 5 services throughout the day to accommodate their massive congregation. And my friend took me through the door for new worshippers and visitors. I was already kind of put off by this. I didn't want to go through the visitors' door because I don't like having special attention drawn to me in a new place. I tried to get my friend to let me go through the regular door, since I just wanted to check the place out and no reason to make a big deal out of it. But she insisted this was how things were done and I had to go. At this point, I'm about to balk. Why is there a separate entrance? Why can't I use the normal door? Are they going to baptize me before they let me in? Because I've been there, done that, and it didn't seem to take. I finally let her drag me in there. She was my ride after all. Inside, there were several staff members, all smiling way too large smiles in the welcoming area, waiting on us newbies. We went up to one lady who gave me a super chipper rendition of the welcome speech that was echoing almost verbatim around us to other newcomers. All are welcome. We don't judge. All faiths, creeds, backgrounds are encouraged. She gave me a free t-shirt, super comfy if I'm being honest, and then a coupon for a free smoothie from the cafe in the church right outside the sanctuary. Now, I grew up Southern Baptist, and the concept of having to pay for something in a church, besides what was in the offering plate, was completely foreign and just this side of blasphemous. I asked my friend what was in the smoothies because I felt it was a more modern way to drink the Kool-Aid, and she wasn't amused by that. But still, free is free, so I took it. We went in, and the music was something. They took popular songs from the time but changed the lyrics to fit the religious theme. After, they had a bunch of people come out and start telling us how the church helped fix their awful paths of sin. They were alleged substance addicts who lost everything to their substances, but it turned around at the church. There were people talking about how giving to the church helped them out of their financial struggles. I mean, excuse me? The minister came out and told us if we were having a rough time mentally, physically, financially, or personally, that giving money to the church would make it better. If it didn't work at first, try giving more. You try giving 10% but no results, God just wants you to give more to spread the word. Try giving 20%. The guy made it clear that giving your time to the church was not as valuable as giving money. He talked about giving massive donations that no normal person could ever afford without losing everything. One guy said that doing this cured him of his gambling. I mean, yeah, because you don't have anything left to gamble. Not really a cure, just an alternative displacement of funds. By the time we left, I felt worse about religion than before. I told my friend that the place felt more like a cult or a really smiley mafia. Wouldn't have surprised me if people telling their stories on stage were just trying to work off a debt to the minister. My friend disagreed and just said that I was jaded. It is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to pass into heaven. That's a very easy saying to understand. It's absolutely insane the mental and ideological backflips that some of these megachurch owners will go through to explain away that saying, and justify the obscene amounts of money that they exploit from their congregation. I don't know whether they believe what they're saying or not, but they're just so blatantly rich and taking people's money away from them that I don't understand how they or the people they take from can justify it. I joined a mum group when I was having my first child. It was a crunchy mum group. For those who don't know, a crunchy mum is kind of like a hipster mum. and the mum groups can get pretty cult-like. I joined the group because of shared ideas. Bed sharing, extended breastfeeding, cloth diapering, and stuff like that. Well, I gave up on cloth diapering and those mums went nuts. They staged an intervention with me and pretty much wouldn't let me leave until I put my kid in a cloth. And that's only some of the things. My parents were part of AmITheA. It's a pyramid scheme, of course, but it's also extremely religious. I'd even classify it as its own denomination of Christianity. They used to have to do meetings, in which they tried to rope friends and family and total strangers they met at work into doing AmITheA too, which began and ended with a prayer even if the people weren't religious or Christian. They'd literally pray for money and wealth. AmITheA worked like a private country within America. It even had its own movies, music, and celebrities. You don't see all of that from the outside. It's not until you're deep into it that you realize how hard they pound this stuff into people. It's a miracle my parents decided to give it up. Going to my first high school football game in South Texas. Real cult vibes. Isogenics and basically the one weekend of seminars that my significant other and I had the chance to go to since it was hosted in Seattle. Yeah, Isogenics comes off as a little cultish. I went to high school orientation with my son. There was a presentation phase where electives and clubs got to talk and tell everyone what they were about. A group of really excited kids got up on stage and started talking about all the great places their club goes and to all of the competitions, without ever saying anything about what they actually do. Before they got done talking, my son watches me pull my phone out and search, "Is DECA a cult?" When typing "Is DECA," the occult part was top recommended additional search. I don't think my son is going to join. I've been involved in a number of cults, both as a leader and a follower. You have more fun as a follower, but you make more money as a leader. I was part of a Second Life roleplay sim years ago that was really dark and toxic even though people swore it wasn't, and people kept going back even though they'd leave even more battered than they already were. Everyone was convinced that it had been a wonderful place and that if they just tried a little bit harder, they could make it great again. No one ever succeeded, of course, and after going back and leaving a few times myself, I finally left for good. But something always bothered me that I could never explain. Why did everyone there feel like the city was theirs? Like they somehow owned a stake in the city, like somehow the city had become a part of their very soul, even though it was just a stupid RP sim. Years later, I was researching abuse psychology and found a list of cult traits. I was able to check off just about every single box. Gosh darn place was run like a cult. Turns out most Second Life roleplay sims are. Screw that stuff. When the people who I thought were my friends turned on me, resorting to threats of violence and the unspeakable act and even death because I disagreed with them. The Penn State scandal with Jerry Sandusky. Screw your little kids, we want another national championship, please. Plus the overinflated egos of most Penn Staters. We get it, you go to Penn State and crap on everyone else with no real reason to do so. I've got some friends that go there that aren't like this, but gosh darn, your IQ isn't that much higher than mine, if it is at all. Penn State isn't MIT on an academic scale, nor is it Alabama on a football scale. That place is a cult. Oh boy, I'll try and keep this brief. So I applied to this sales job. Got asked in for an interview the next day. I go there and it's cool, but it seems like they're just telling me how great their business is rather than actually interviewing me. Second group interview arranged. I meet a cute girl. Vibes. The team leader interviewing us buys us coffee and generally seems way too bubbly. Suspicion kicks in. I get told we start Monday. Over the weekend, I matched the cute girl on Tinder. This is kind of a side story, but we started dating over the next few weeks. I got into work on Monday. Morning meeting is basically a fricking circle where the boss man's right-hand man preaches about motivation or ambitions or some crap and waves about how dope Elon Musk's life or Bill Gates or something are, and they all did it by being self-employed. There's like a routine that all the others have learned where they chant certain things whenever the front guy says anything in specific. We roleplay training pitches before going out, loud, bumpy music to enforce the good vibes. I already know I'm being played, but I really need the money at the time, so I just roll with it and half-heartedly go into the whole, yep, I'm gonna have this jerky, over-enthusiastic energy if it helps me get sales and stay here until I find something better mentality. Before I even start working, they had literally explained quite honestly how the entire business works with a trickle-down commission system, but it was pretty clear that the way it really works was the following. Someone starts here, then realizes they're earning nothing, then hears all the stories about how successful people have been, realizes they need to take new recruits below them to scrape off their earnings, takes new recruits, then realizes they have to pander to and over-exaggerate how the person below them is going to become rich too, otherwise they'll just quit, and practically get mind-controlled and mind-control others. Hope the person below them gets more people even further below them, and the whole business is about being a deceptive sociopath and deceiving people until you've suckered them enough to train them to also be deceptive sociopaths. As far as I can tell, the management lied about how many sales people got on average to make it look like others were earning more. The business literally had a whole other business above it that was taking a cut of their earnings, and several businesses under it when team leaders' teams got too big. If you're interested in it, you can read about the kind of business at the Devil Corp WordPress. The manager that I worked for is literally pictured on that site with devil horns. I found that site about 2 weeks after I started, and it basically confirmed everything I already knew. It's practically a business and cult that makes its money by what is basically psychology engineering. I told the girl I was dating, who started at the same time as me, everything I knew, and she thought I was a conspiracy nutjob, called me delusional and several other harsh things, and sold me out to the boss. I got called into the office and the manager showed me the texts I sent her. Last I heard, from one good lad who somewhat believed what I had to say, everyone had been talking crap about me behind my back because that's exactly what they want. They want any defectors to become a laughingstock. It's been about a year, but in the UK, these businesses are spreading like wildfire because they're literally designed to just expand and reincorporate into new child companies in different locations. I see people cold approaching other people on the street or at the edge of stores with badges. I normally try to talk to them, confirm what company they're with and who they're affiliated with, and they normally lead back to the same few businesses. I tell them to check out the link I just mentioned and hope that they aren't too brainwashed and that they look into what they're doing. It needs media exposure because really I see more of these people and more of these job postings on boards every month. What was the craziest thing you saw someone do with a company credit card? Buy approximately $65 of gas 4 times in 1 hour. He only had 1 company car but 3 personal cars at home. After an audit, he had been getting away with it for over a year. Had a friend who managed to spend $20,000 on her corporate card over the course of about a year and a half. Apparently, she felt like she wasn't being compensated or treated well at her job, even though she actually was, and would go out and buy things on the card. Dinner, gas, books, makeup, and clothes, among other things. After the fact, she told me that in the beginning she'd been careful to buy things only at places she knew her boss and his partner would shop at, because they were the only other 2 people who had cards on the account. Then later she tossed all reason aside and would basically hijack the credit card bill every month and cut it up and reprint it without her purchases on there, like her boss or his accountant would never notice the discrepancy in dollar amounts. One day her boss called her into his office and she thought she was going to get a raise. Nope. Credit card statements all over the place. The ultimatum was, pay the money back within the week or be charged. She had to beg a relative for the money. The dumbest part was, even after all of that, she still didn't think she was the bad person in the situation. We stopped being friends shortly after that. A co-worker was dating someone that also worked for the company. He used his company card to buy an addition to the girlfriend's house. Something like a $20,000 addition. The accountants caught it and started digging around to figure out why we had bought so much wood, drywall, and other building materials. Finally, someone got the idea to start driving around and looking at the employees' homes, and found the huge addition on the girlfriend's house. They were both fired for theft. The best part was it wasn't even her house, it was a rental. Once she lost her job, she couldn't afford the rent anymore and got evicted. I'm sure that the landlord was laughing his butt off at the whole thing and got a nice free addition to the house. Well, I guess the same kind of person who tries to add a massive section to a rental would be the same kind of person to spend $20,000 on renovations on a company credit card. I've never had one of those, just things like per diem with my jobs, but to be honest, it sounds like way more trouble than it's worth. No thanks. I was bartending one night. It was a Thursday, so karaoke was going on. A guy walked in a business suit and walked up to the bar and said, "As long as I'm here, everything is on this card." I said, "Sure enough, what would you like to drink?" And he said, "When I say everything, I mean every drink, shot, and food for every person." He stayed until closed and tallied up a huge bar tab, tipped 50%. I came to find out he had been let go, but the company forgot to take his credit card. I don't know whatever happened legally, but I made close to $1,000 in tips that night. Back when I was in high school, I took a cooking class. This is in a small town where the grocery store is only a stone's throw away from the high school, and cooking students are often sent to the store to pick up ingredients. When a student would do this, they'd get a little card, which they used to pay, and they'd have to sign a little form at the till. I did this several times. So this one day, the teacher asks one kid to go to the store to get oats. He comes back with a bag completely full, and when he's asked how much he spent on oats, he responds, "About $200, as if that was a completely normal amount of money to spend on oats. I wish I was kidding. I remember reading what someone did to get fired on their first day. He went out on the corporate card and brought like 6 suits on his corporate credit card on his lunch break. I worked at an exotic dance club back in the 90s, and a customer ran up a $3,500 tab on his corporate Amex and left without closing it out. A few days later, we got a visit from the police as he reported the card stolen. Thing is, he was a regular, and we had plenty of video footage of him getting lap dances while wearing his corporate-issued polo shirt. He not only got fired, but was charged with filing a false police report, which led to his wife divorcing him for being such a pole dancer-loving idiot. A guy bought a diamond ring for his wife. When it was brought up to him, he said he was going to pay it off, except he never mentioned it to anyone until he was caught. Instead of firing him, they took it out of his next 6 or more paychecks. Nice interest-free loan for him, I guess. I used to audit corporate card purchases for a Fortune 50 company. I caught a guy trying to buy a $30K boat from Base Pro and a $15K walk-in humidor. We had a co-worker, may he rest in peace. He spent £13,000 in the adult dance club with the company card. He would have spent more if the card hadn't blocked it. He self-deleted the next day. I think it was a big FU to the company. I don't know that this was dumb since it was technically legit, but it's still shocking to me. I was at a conference with the big partners from my firm and got invited out to dinner with them and a prospective client. There were about 8 of us in total at a nice steakhouse, and I'm a wine fan, and they had a nice list. Partner indicated that my counterpart with the client also liked wine and that we should order a few bottles. Partners and CEO were drinking scotch. When we got the tab, it was $17,000. I was, of course, the only one surprised by this. It was worth it, too, since we probably billed the client within the first week, but damn. I once ran an audit for a company, who through my audit found out that an employee was using her manager's credit card to foot her personal purchases. Stuff on the receipts included massive orders for protein bars, endless entries to PayPal, and even tickets for 2 to an NFL game. Thousands of dollars, and apparently no regret was shown as she was getting canned. So stupid. A guy I know took his family on a ski trip to Aspen, every year for 8 years. A few years back, it came to light that my mother, the head accountant at a mid-sized company, had been using company cards and creative accounting for nearly a decade to the tune of at least $100K. They stopped investigating when they hit that number because it was enough to pass the threshold for the maximum felony penalty, which is 25 years. We became aware of her crimes when she went missing and ended up attempting self-deletion the night before her arraignment. Her attempt was unsuccessful, but she finally went through with it a little more than a year later, on the night before she was set to begin serving her sentence. The whole thing has upended my life. At my company, we once ran an audit, probably coming from the board. It turns out our CISO was charging over $30,000 a month on her card by breaking pretty much every corporate expense policy there was. All flights were first class, hired personal drivers everywhere she went instead of taking a taxi, $200 or more dinners at high-end restaurants almost every night, suites at the nicest hotels and resorts in the area, and $300 or more on spa visits at any hotel that had one, among other things. She was promptly asked to step down. Also had a senior manager who knew he was getting fired, and he went out and bought all of his employees everything that he could, just barely within the policy, so the company would have trouble coming after him for the money. New laptops, additional monitors, company cell phones, briefcase bags, and approved any and all training they wanted to take, even if it required unnecessary travel. I think he racked up almost $40,000 in his last week with the company. I had an employee buy a used car with his. I had another employee pay a court-ordered penalty with it, and had one more draw down cash to buy substances with it. Alcohol, working girls. 20 years in people management, I've seen it all. My first day on the job, a Starbucks employee charged my corporate Amex card $4,500 for a latte instead of $4.50. Oh well, Starbucks is famously overpriced, but yes, on second thought, that does look a tad pricey even for them. Coupled with a 15% tip, I hope you had fun explaining it to your boss. Rest in peace, expensive coffee consumer. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Guy was overseas on a business trip in Eastern Europe and in an establishment he shouldn't have been in. Decided to buy a round of drinks, figuring no one would know from the name of the place what it was. Unfortunately, later he was enjoying the pleasures of a lady that worked in the establishment and, having run out of cash, forgotten he had used his work card to buy the drinks when agreeing to specific services being offered by the employee, and was then surprised to be questioned by the FD a month later on why a restaurant he brought drinks in was also charging him a €50 supplement for doing it in the butt. Worked at a retail company that gave all of its store managers corporate cards. The cards had high limits on them, so the store managers could use that instead of maintaining petty cash on hand or having to use personal cards while traveling for training. While visiting one of the stores, I asked where their Keurig machine was. I wanted a coffee, and the closest Starbucks was a few blocks away. I'd seen the manager's expense report with a purchase for a Keurig machine, K-cups, a small bathroom fixture, and a few other things. The assistant manager says, "We don't have a Keurig machine." After looking into it further, it turns out the manager had been using the card to buy several personal items over the last few years. Ended up repaying a little over $20,000 in purchases. When working away, while not officially authorized but never queried, it was generally accepted the manager there would take the workers out for a couple of drinks at the end of whatever we were doing. Not a crazy night out or anything, but a round or two at the nearest bar to where we were staying. The manager had been out most of the day with another boss drinking when we finished work late in the afternoon, and we went to the bar to have a few beers and something to eat at the hotel we were staying at. "It's okay, I'll get this one." And about 5 rounds later, we were all like, are you sure this is fine?" "Yeah, it's okay." I'm a decent drinker, but even I was off my butt at the end of the night. I woke up at around 10 a.m. to go down for food. Apparently, the majority of the booze drunk that night went on the card. We officially didn't get in trouble, but now you can only use the company card for sanctioned work events. Not quite a corporate credit card, but in the same vein. Many years ago, when I was in college, our student government had a retreat near the start of the year. The college agreed to reimburse for food, so they submitted their receipts, including their liquor store receipt. Not only will the college not pay for alcohol, drinking was forbidden at school-sponsored events. Apparently, this fact was made abundantly clear to the student government. The entire government had to resign, and new elections were held. My roommate went to a networking thing out of state paid for by the company. All the salesmen had corporate cards for taking out clients and such. The second night there, they all headed to the exotic dance club. One of the new guys charged about $500 on his card at the club. He reported it stolen after the trip, and as far as I've heard, nothing came from it. Dude tried to pass off a $350 spa package as a gift for a client. Problem is, we have no clients based near us, the closest being some 2,000 miles away. My boss wasted $127 on iTunes to download some music. A guy lived across the country and commuted at the beginning and end of every week. For the first few months, any of his flights or lodging expenses could be covered by the company per his contract. After that time expired, he was expected to have either moved here permanently or start covering his own transportation and hotels if he chose to keep commuting every week. He simply never stopped charging his company card for it. He tried to get clever with it too. He'd route his flights through other cities and pretend he was conducting business there, so they were technically supposed to be covered by the company, and would lose hotel receipts thinking it would be impossible to prove that the hotels he was staying in were local to us. After nearly a year of catching these things and having to make him write the company a personal check every month, they finally fired him. When the Army first went to a travel card system, they initially used Amex. The card had no limit and were activated at all times. One of my soldiers went out and brought a set of rims for his personal vehicle to the tune of $2,500. Now there are limits and the cards are deactivated until needed. Invited their landlord out to a night on the town in lieu of rent payment, and told the company it was for a sales lead, so they charged the dinner and drinks to the company card. Basically, free rent. Purchased lavish dinners at a local surf and turf, copious amounts of liquor included, for himself and his mistress. They were both married and his wife actually had a chronic illness. He then claimed that the expenses were staff appreciation events. What actually got him fired was when the auditors came and asked employees, "What did you do at the staff appreciation event on X date?" And we were all like, "What staff appreciation event?" Honestly, at the time it was hilarious that this was what resulted in his firing, since he was doing so much else that was much worse. He hired his mistress, slept with her at work, and fired everyone who caught them at it. She hired another relative for basically a janitorial role and paid him $30 an hour, when the going rate for those kinds of positions are generally $10 an hour. He cut salaries without cause and claimed it was because they'd maxed out, never attended meetings, he stopped paying company bills, Large Corp had us on must prepay cash only, which is unheard of in our industry, and he did many other things like this. But the use of the corporate card was what he finally got canned for, since it was the easiest for them to prove. This guy sounds like the complete package of what you picture when someone tells you to think of a corrupt corporate boss. That complacence at restructuring the entire workplace just to enable his filthy habits is just so damn typical. He definitely deserved the firing. During the 2008 recession, the president of the company took a pay cut, so he just started putting everything on his company card. All the gas for his family's cars, dinner for his daughter's volleyball team, TV for his son's apartment, and so on. No real attempt to hide any of it. The accounting department started complaining about it, and he told them to just put it in. Finally, the head accountant just said no, she couldn't sign her name to this stuff anymore. The president of the company fired her on the spot, even calling the police to help escort her out of the building, telling them he suspected her of embezzling but couldn't prove it, but he feared for his safety. A year later, the scumbag golden parachuted out of the company, and the company barely survived. Using the company card to buy gas for a company car that was on a paid fuel card separate from the company credit card, and then also expensing the receipts for both the credit card fuel bill and the driven mileage. I used to review credit card purchases. Employees would have to submit receipts and explain what each line item was for. One guy brought a $500 watch and wrote down on his spreadsheet, "Watch to replace my broken one." Apparently he felt his personal wristwatch was work-related and worthy of replacing with a Swiss watch with automatic movement. I'm horrified to even have my corporate card in my wallet, but I did show it to a cashier to get a student discount. He asked if I had a student ID, so I flashed my university corporate credit card and he believed it. A little different, but my former coworker didn't have a corporate card, so he expensed and was reimbursed for parking tickets because there was no legal parking in Philly. I once brought a Toblerone and I got caught. A guy I worked with went down a dark road, like leaving Las Vegas dark. He maxed it in a month on booze and electronics. A trip was in there too. He lost his job and moved to Arizona. Buy a $20,000 mail-order bride, frantically try to get money to pay it off, obviously can't hide it, and gets fired. Did he at least get to keep the bride, or did the company take possession of her too? I have no clue. Old company I worked for. Give guy corporate credit card to go buy groceries for the home he was working at. 3 hours later, he didn't come back or return calls. My boss looked at the account to see if there was any action on it. Lo and behold, a $600 charge at a Best Buy. Safe to say the guy thoroughly stepped in it and was not answering his phone, but did respond to a text message that basically said, "Frick you, I quit," the next morning. He was also thoroughly disappointed when he came to get his last check and realized it was about $30. Late 90s, the superintendent of my local school board district used a district credit card to buy about $300 worth of dinners and booze for school board members during a business trip in New York. Got charged with theft because of the alcohol purchases, even though he reimbursed the district when he did his expense report. After a lot of investigation and court time, the superintendent was fined $100 and had to resign. He then had to settle for becoming the superintendent of the Houston Independent School District, The 7th largest district in the nation. That'll learn him. Give it to an exotic dancer before passing out. They swiped as many times as possible before leaving. He allegedly paid the $10,000 bill out of pocket so he wouldn't be discovered. My dad and I bought Pokemon cards. Granted, it was his business. Buy lunch at Hooters for his employee because he wanted to be friends with him. He had only recently gotten the card back because it was taken away after his last purchase of an $80 magic kit. I rented a Lamborghini with mine, but I didn't expense it to the company, so it's fine, as long as I paid the bill by the end of the month, which I did. I just wanted to cross that off my bucket list, and I don't have any credit cards of my own, so I took the opportunity. Epic all-day drink-a-thon at the pub during a team meeting that was supposed to be 2 hours. 8 hours later, and covered in someone else's spew with my tie wrapped around my head, I stumbled back into the office. At the next Christmas party, the boss headbutted the supervisor who was responsible. He was a real jerk anyway, although I felt bad for him as he was an alcoholic. Yeah, the company is no more and still owes me $4,000. My old boss took me and a few co-workers out for a few drinks to celebrate my last day. Dropped about $5,000 on the entire night. About half of that was at the exotic dance club. I was 16 and I got a corporate card for my first job. As I was so excited, I posted a Snapchat of me and the card while some rap song about money was playing and you could see every number, but I deleted it a little bit later. That's probably why most jobs for 16-year-olds don't get corporate cards. A few years ago, my boss, at the time, sent me with the company card to buy him a calculator. I asked no questions and promptly returned with said device, only to watch him open up Microsoft Excel and say that he was finally going to be able to finish his totals column. I love this one, nowhere near the blatant corruption of some of the others, just a whole kind of other stupidity. It's almost cute. This is a Michael Scott blunder right here. There's not even any evil intent or gross skeeviness like most of the others. Just a sweet dumb boy trying to do his job. I had a boss who had a quick meeting with someone in Sydney, Australia. Naturally, he wanted to fly first class. Well, he couldn't be without his wife, so she came too. And his kids? Sure, let's throw them on the bill. Well, they couldn't possibly sleep anywhere nasty, so they got 2 suites in a 5-star hotel. Lunch and dinner every day for 4 people, plus entertainment, all on the company dime. For that 1 2-hour meeting, he and his family spent 3 weeks on a luxury holiday in Australia. Now it's been many years, but I believe the flight bill itself came to $35,000. Hotel was $30,000. Dinners, show, entertainments, amusement parks, sure, why not? And fancy wines were an equally large sum. In the end, seeing as this was a small company, 3 people were made redundant because this guy drained the pot. He was the CEO after all. He quickly came back as a contractor. He was the CEO after all. So his punishment for ruining the lives of 3 people and costing the company $100,000 was that his family got a nice holiday and I guess he had to follow some different tax laws or something. Must be nice to be the CEO, huh? And I've just checked on the company, they've recovered, they're doing a booming business and he's gone. Buy a water pick to water their plants. I accidentally pocket-bought my friend's racy adult novel off Amazon because yay, one-click ordering. I've never been so glad that they're reasonable about returns for accidental digital purchases because I did not want to explain to our purchasing officer why our department bought a book of vampire adult material. Lesson learned. Always log out of your work Amazon account. When did a random nobody absolutely blow your frickin' mind? I went to my local racquetball court looking for a pickup game when I was in my early 20s. This was in San Diego back in 91 or 92. I was reasonably athletic and I was just starting to consider myself competent at racquetball. Anyway, the only other player there was a 70-year-old retired naval officer. He offers a match, so lacking more athletic opposition, I accepted. Never before and never since have I been beaten so badly at anything. He completely and effortlessly destroyed me. We played 3 matches and I scored only 1 point. I was left exhausted and utterly broken. He barely broke a sweat. I don't think I've picked up a racket since then, so utter was my defeat. In short, senior citizen crushes cocky 21-year-old 63-1 playing racquetball. Mullet Man. I met this guy, a construction worker. He was gruff, older, and rocked a long mullet. The party in the back was thick and went all the way down his back. I thought he was just a crusty, kinda white trash dude, and started calling him Mullet Man in my head and to my co-workers. We worked for a competing firm and saw him at industry events. Fast forward a few months, and I hear him telling someone how his niece has a terminal illness and he's growing out his hair for her to have a new wig made. He'd heard that untreated hair works best, so he figured his would be ideal. I've never felt like such a jerk. You go, Mullet Man, you beautiful human. I worked at an electronics retailer 2 years ago. One day, a middle-aged farmer, and I mean farmer, complete with overalls, boots, and a straight-billed cap, came into the store looking for a cell phone. I immediately sold him the simplest, easiest phone we carried, going into great detail on every feature, including the camera, sending text messages, and every imaginable part of the phone's hardware and software. The next day, the same guy comes in, and I immediately think he's having phone trouble and resign myself to an hour of explanation. He asks for an external hard drive because he wants to move his custom kernel of Linux to his new computer. I can't remember the exact details, I was totally floored by his request. He then spots my textbook on international political economy. My boss was very forgiving of me studying in slow times, and the farmer asks me 15 minutes of in-depth questions on one of the main contemporary theorists in the field, Karl Polanyi, beyond even what myself and my classmates had asked. The class was graduate level. Needless to say, I was berating myself for ever stereotyping this seemingly backwards farmer from the 60s. You've got a lot of time to sit and think about stuff when you're watching corn grow. Nice overreaching lesson on the majority of these stories: do not judge a book by its cover. A truly ancient saying that you think most of us would have had the sense to accept by now. Apparently not. Met a guy while going through college. He was in my major and most of my classes. He was blazed most of the time and had no fricking brains about him. He failed almost every class due to not trying or slacking off, and was always in an insane panic the last 2 weeks of classes to not fail. He ended up repeating classes a lot. At some point, I decided to switch colleges. I graduate this December. I got a LinkedIn request from him yesterday. He has finished his master's in engineer technology now, and has buttloads of recommendations on his profile from employers that he did internships under, all giving him glowing reviews about his work ethic. I left this guy in the dust 3 years ago. Sometime between then and now, he cleaned up his act and worked so hard that not only did he close the year gap in courses between me and him due to all his failings, but he also accelerated ahead 2 additional years and finished a master's. How the frick did he do that, Fred? I watched you come to class blazed for a year, and then you cram 4 years of work into 2? Dance off with a 6'2", 150-pound white man. Never again.
Tall, white, skinny dudes are black men in disguise.
We've got the moves like Gumby. I have a friend who has dyslexia and is incredibly shy even around his close friends. We did an electronics project in high school where we had to design an electronic game or a metronome or some other crap. He chose to make a game and made this incredible device that played a happy little tune when you won and a sad tune when you lost. It sat in a well-molded and polished box and had a segment display on the front. I was in awe sitting there with my crappy little metronome that didn't even work. A group of family friends and I went paintballing for the first time, which ended up having a bunch of the kids against the parents. Being young and cocky, we thought it would be a stomp and marched confidently into the woods. What we forgot was that all of our parents were immigrants from Taiwan. Taiwan has mandatory military service. I was reminded of that fact rather harshly when I tried to ambush my dad. The paintball in my face pinned this fact to my memory forever.
I worked with this kid who was kinda pudgy. He wanted to be a Navy SEAL. Everyone laughed. He did it. He became a Navy SEAL.
Similar story. When I was in AIT, like Army Vocational School for enlisted people, the airborne recruiters came around and gave this presentation about airborne school, and at the end they asked for volunteers to sign up and attend the school after they completed AIT. Now, the only real benefits of going to airborne school are the few extra bucks every pay period just for having the training, and the prestige of having that red beret. Maybe a dozen people from our company ended up signing up for the school. It was mostly who you'd expect. The hooah guys who thought they were hot crap and wanted to prove it to everyone. Except for one guy, Curtis. Curtis is an odd fellow. He was in his early 20s, short, pudgy, and goofy. Whenever he walked past someone, other enlisted people of course, he'd cross his eyes and pull a silly face. He joked around a lot, was a very social and cool guy, but he wasn't exactly, tough. Not someone who seems like airborne material. So naturally, all of the other guys who signed up at airborne school started talking crap about him. How he was going to wash out in the first weeks, among other things. AIT came to an end and we all went on to our first duty stations. I'd added a lot of people from my AIT company on my Facebook account, and one day I was looking through the newsfeed and I saw a picture of Curtis in a red beret. Turns out he was the only person from our company to graduate from airborne school. All those crap talkers and tough guys are washed out. The chubby little goof now rocks the raspberry beret. What a frickin' trooper. Every time I play StarCraft. How the frick does he have 10 carriers? This is bullcrap, it's been 35 seconds! I'm working as a production assistant on a reality TV show. We had to shoot at a record store in a very impoverished, crime-laden area of the Bronx, and we had a celebrity or two with us. So we hire some security people to keep the local riffraff at bay. In the past, the security guys had been overzealous, rude, giant bouncer butthole-like dudes, so we're filming and a celebrity walks in. A crowd's already gathered, and they're getting loud and being obnoxious. This one super thuggish 20-something-year-old starts pushing his way through the crowd and gets to the door but gets stopped by one of the bouncers. Now, this bouncer guy is a 250 or so pound black dude who's a fricking monster, not to mention he has a piece on him. I'm freaking out because Thug Life is getting pushy and yelling at the security guy, yelling at me and being a butthead. Bouncer says, "Baby, you know I want to let you in here. I love you, man, but I can't. It's my job and you know how it is. I got kids, and with that style of yours, I'm sure you got yourself a hot mama back home too." Thuggish kid goes, "Aight, man," and slaps and hugs the security guy, then walks out. Situation entirely diffused. Security guy looks at me with this huge grin and says, "You gotta kill him with kindness, baby." I hear this is a great tactic for confrontation in general for people who come in just determined to hate on everything. Say you're sorry you didn't like it, did my best to make it good, tell them something you like about their appearance, if applicable, and apparently the majority of the time they'll apologize, say they were having a bad day and leave. Cute when it works out, no promises that it will though. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I found out one of my dumber friends had the unique ability of knowing how long anything would take. Anything. She was not the brightest button, failed out of college, and made terrible financial decisions, but damn if she didn't know how long it would take to go to Walmart, get gas, and come home. 34 minutes. If you gave her a highway marker, she'd tell you down to the minute how far away you were from your house. It was incredible. I've never seen anything like it, and she was never wrong. The little woman who was my first partner in Taekwondo. I was a much taller white belt and she was a green belt. That was the first day I watched the gymnasium ceiling pass overhead in a slow, dreamy way, followed by the sound of my landing. I was roughly about 8 or 9, so me, my mom, 2 brothers and a friend all went to the cinema. We ended up getting out of the cinema at like 10. As we were walking back to the car, I kind of dropped back a little bit as I was in my own world. All I heard from behind me was a teen's voice getting my attention. Unaware of any real dangers in life, at such a tender age, and my mum a few meters up ahead from me, I turned around. Soon as I turned, one of the kids knees me in the stomach and the other one punched me in the face. The worst bit was I couldn't even shout as I was winded. A few seconds pass, and I shouted. My mum turned and saw me on the floor and started sprinting for these kids. She ran straight past me, and I can imagine she was probably thinking, "Screw him, they're going to be eating through a straw." So right in front of me, my mum grabbed one of them and started punching the 16-year-old kid in the face, throwing him around like a rag doll. The other one was shouting for her to stop, and he ran up to my mum and she did literally the same to him. But I could see blood all over this other one's jacket. She had ripped part of his ear. Security came over not so long after, and then the cops. These kids were arrested and nothing came of my mum kicking 7 shades of crap out of them. Turns out they'd been going around the Metro Center, where the cinema was, shoplifting, pickpocketing, and being all-round urethras. Safe to say everyone in school knew the next day. I imagine it was a good bully deterrent as well. When I was going through college, I was put into a group for a group project with a guy that I'd been paired with before. He had done nothing. It was awful. We ended up picking up all of his slack last time, and I wasn't looking forward to doing that again. Well, long story short, apparently he'd had a little come-to-Jesus moment with his advisor and realized he needed to put effort into graduating. That guy fricking carried us. 11 out of 10 stars. It was amazing. Group leader asked him to do something and he knocked it out of the frickin' park. We got our 100% on the project. Top grade in our class. My grandpa has Parkinson's, and in the last few years he's been getting really frail to the point where you can't feel anything between the skin and the bone. Anyway, taking care of him was becoming a lot for my step-grandmother, so we tried finding a good nursing home for him. At the home where he went, people treated him so badly that he had a flashback to being a prisoner of war in the Korean War. My grandma got a call that they found him 3 miles away, perfectly fine, but we all thought the guy couldn't even get out of bed on his own. My grandfather's getting close to dying now, and he certainly did a lot during his life. It was good to hear that he still had some of that in him, when he just seemed like a shell before. My father-in-law. My mother-in-law raised my husband and his brother, and my father-in-law was always kind of this quiet presence. She always said he was disinterested and didn't care about the boys. She said a lot of really awful things about him. Their divorce was messy, but I took what she said at face value. Fast forward to now. When I got laid off, my father-in-law, in his quiet way, invited us to stay at his house until I finished school, with our 2 crazy toddlers and our old cat, who doesn't always make it to the litter box. I was hesitant at first, but we didn't really have options. Turns out he's the salt-of-the-earth guy. He works and reads and builds stuff for our babies to play with, like a 6-inch tall working windmill, and he's the best grandpa any kid could ever want. Turns out he always loved the boys deeply, but struggled with depression since my mother-in-law took them and left. He's brought everyone birthday presents, school clothes, and things since they were little, even though they had no idea. I also found out that he's been paying off all of mother-in-law's bills even after the boys grew up and moved out. When I asked him why, he said, "She's the mother of my children. I don't really want to see her struggle." One of the best people I know. I hope one day we can repay him for all of his kindness. I was in high school, and behind my friend's house there was some farmland. One day, for whatever reason, 4 of us decided to go out there and build a fort. It ended up turning out awesome, and we decided to spend the night in it. We filled up an empty water bottle with his parents' vodka and built a fire out there. The owner of the property must have seen the fire and didn't appreciate us trespassing, so he called the cops. Around midnight, 5 or 6 cops surrounded us. We were all underage and we tried to convince the cops we weren't drinking. It worked because we hadn't really started drinking much of the vodka yet, and the cops didn't think to open our water bottle. So the cops tell us as long as we put out the fire and take down the fort, we wouldn't get into any trouble. My idiot friend says, "Okay, officer, we'll just go ahead and put this fire out and be on our way," and dumps the bottle into the fire. Whoosh! Instantly in handcuffs. I underestimated my friend that day. He was that stupid. Maybe I overestimated him. Oh well, still a funny story. And here I was waiting for the story of how one of those rural country cops turned out to be a super sleuth who completely blew your mind by identifying the viscosity and slight color difference of vodka in the bottle. But nope, just a truly amazing level of dumb. Well done, friend. I did outreach with working girls from the street for a few years. One went missing under suspicious circumstances, and there was evidence that she had been murdered, but no body. The police had the guy but needed to build a strong case. He was known to some of the women, so the cops wanted to talk with as many as possible. Most did, but there was one who was rumored to have strong evidence of the man's intent. She was so strung out all the time, and literally months went by of her blowing off appointments with the cops to tell what she knew. She would hide from them as she was scared. They finally picked her up on the street and she talked to them, as by then they knew that making appointments with her was a dead end. It turns out she did have some great info, and they wanted her to appear in court. We helped her as much as possible, got her a decent outfit and toiletries, and kept reminding her of the date and location of the trial. She didn't show up when she was due, much to everyone's disappointment. Next day of the trial, she walked in, clean, in a nice outfit, and sober. Testified very well. In fact, impressively. She said later that she had gone on a huge bender the day before due to being nervous and knew she wouldn't come across well. He is now serving a life sentence. Really didn't think she had it in her, but she happily proved us all wrong. I underestimated my cousin. She always seemed to be the queen bee of middle school, and I resented her for it. But one day I heard that she completely ditched the in-crowd because they were making fun of some kid. I realized I'd been completely wrong about her character and that I'm extremely proud of her for this. I was arguing with a customer at work. I, like a pretentious jerk, tried to reinforce a point I was making by quoting the only line I knew from Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. She, in a fit of anger, proceeded to give me the next 20 lines of that character's soliloquy all from memory. I got owned. big time. My kid. So he was born with some limb differences, missing bones, clubbed hands, 3 fingers instead of 4 because one finger had to be made into thumbs. Was looking forward to having a boy who was into sports, but I just figured that wasn't going to happen. Didn't think he could hold a baseball bat or throw a ball straight, among other things. Figured soccer or running, if anything, would be his thing. When he was 2, he was really into hockey. I figured, he's 2, it'll pass. Nope, the little guy learned how to skate in diapers, but had a hard time holding the stick. We wrote to a whole bunch of hockey glove manufacturers, and Reebok had just brought CCM, or the other way round, and they made him custom gloves. They didn't work, but it was really freaking cool they did that. The kiddo got the first pair of RBK gloves in the world. Anyway, so he turns 4 and wants to play t-ball and soccer, and gets older and tries lacrosse, all the while playing hockey. I figure he'll give up because he won't be very good at those things, but he is. He's actually decent at soccer, baseball, lacrosse, basketball and golf, you name it. Not a star, clearly, but good enough to contribute to the team. So he turns 8 and his older buddy from the neighborhood is a hockey phenom. Gets invited to be on all these AAA summer teams, so my kid wants to do that. Well, he can contribute to the team, but he's nothing like this kid. I let him try out for a new team in the area, but they don't get enough kids for his birth year. He tries again, next year, same deal. They take a couple of kids from his birth year and put them in with the older group, but not him. So the 3rd year, he makes the team and improves immensely. But this team isn't that great, being a new team and all. So he decides he's going to play in the NHL. And to do that, he has to play Division 1 hockey. And to do that, he wants to get a scholarship to a prep school near here. And to do that, he needs to make a higher level AAA summer team. The kid has it all planned out. So I tell him, look, crazy talent like Crosby or Gretzky doesn't come along all that often. So teams still have to fill their rosters, but there's a lot of competition. And if you want to make it to that level, you have to put in the work to get there. This team he wants to make is ridiculous money, even in hockey terms. And I tell him if he wants to play summer hockey for fun, that's no problem, but if he wants to play on the expensive one, I'm going to need to see him working hard. No asking to skip practice. I'm willing to pay if he's willing to put in the work. I said nothing else. He's 11 at this time. Wouldn't you know it, the little crapbag puts in the work and makes the team. So now he's 11 and he's got scouts coming to games and invitations to play in tournaments, and the special camps are coming in. He's been schmoozing the nearest juniors coach, and one night he raced a bunch of the players on the team, who were all ages 17 to 20, and kicked 2 of their butts. One of them was 6'5" to my kid's 5'4". The coach tracked me down and told him he was saving a spot for my kid on his team. He's gotten himself TV interviews, articles in the newspaper, and spots on teams by being charming, good-looking, polite, and by being a hockey player who works hard and is coachable and puts the team's needs before his own, and sometimes over players, who are a tad better skill-wise than he is. So yeah, I totally underestimated my own kid. What an awesome story of grit and just a great attitude. And all that success and pre-planning at the age of 12? The guy's more onto his life pre-puberty than some of us are at 30. Amazing kid, he deserves all the best. Underestimated, but in a good way. There was a Super Smash Bros. Brawl tournament in 2009 at the dorms, open to all residents. It was a team tournament, so you got matched up with one person for the whole night. I got a soft-spoken guy whose first words I heard were, I thought this one had Mega Man in it. So I'm cursing several Greco-Roman gods at getting probably the biggest noob in the room. Turns out he was the best in the room and was just trolling me. Took on everyone and won with a little help from me, here and there. We later played against each other in 1v1 tournaments and he beat me by a smidge, but he helped me get a $25 Best Buy gift card. I invited my girlfriend along to paintball for my 21st birthday. Her grandparents owned a farm, so I knew she wasn't a princess, but she certainly isn't low maintenance these days. The game was Capture the Flag. The field was set up in a valley with a team on either side and a single meter-wide footbridge connecting the two sides. The flag was sitting in the middle of the bridge, the only cover being 2 waist-high walls on either side. We pushed up to the flag and were pinned by a vicious volley of vivid viscera. Naturally, I'm scared crapless and I hunker down. Clearly all that time playing first-person shooters hasn't trained me to be a super soldier at all. Just as I'd mustered enough courage to keep my head above the cover, I see my girlfriend blaze past with reckless abandon, shooting wildly. She nabs the flag, runs back past me and back towards base. She never got hit once. I have never been more stunned or impressed than that moment. In short, my girlfriend wears the pants and I go number 2 in mine. What were serial killers like in person before they got caught? A guy I work with used to carpool to school with Aaron Hernandez. A mutual friend used to go to high school with him and said he was a pretty normal kid for a while. He said he really changed when he went down to Florida for a summer for probably some football-related stuff. When he came back, he looked like a different person, all tatted up, bigger and taller. Spent a summer in Ames, Iowa with some family. Jeffrey Dahmer was a neighbor of a family friend. My cousin and I built a haunted house out of a playhouse in the backyard. Mostly we blindfolded the neighborhood kids and led them through. We had a bowl of grapes with some oil on them and shoved the kids' hands into it and told them it was eyeballs. We formed cold, congealed spaghetti into what we told them were brains. I personally led Jeffrey through, and every time someone says his name, I wonder if I was the cause of his problems. He was a loner in one of the biggest schools in the state. He wasn't weird or creepy or smelly or anything, but the popular kids would pick on him. He was friends with my girlfriend. We were going to hang out one weekend, but he bludgeoned his mother to death and ran away with his girlfriend instead. I'm probably relatively unique in that I know 3 people on death row, and 1 other murderer. Case number 1 was a completely horrible human being. Threatened my life in high school, and I always figured he'd kill someone in a bar fight. Instead, him and 2 friends went, and he had one of them kill the husband, while he chased the wife down and shot her in the back. I was called to testify for the prosecution at his last death penalty trial. He was huge and scary as heck, and a truly, truly horrible human being. Based on the testimony I heard, he still is. The second was kind of an odd guy, but pretty nice in person. I played Starfleet battles with him. Him and a friend killed a lady. No idea why. He seemed more of a follower than a leader, and that's pretty much how the murder went down. He's still on death row. The third was more friends with my ex-wife. He even watched our kids a couple of times. He was quiet and seemed friendly. And finally, this other kid I knew in high school. He seemed pretty quiet, he read westerns a lot. Being a big book reader, I chatted a few times with him. He seemed nice. One day he took a shotty to school and at lunch blasted the guy convicted of taking advantage of his brother. He ended up getting a slap on the wrist for it. I felt he should have gotten a medal knowing the details that came out later. I suspect the judge gave him the least that he could. About 10 years before he took the lives of 2 women, he came to our house. He was about 16 or 17, on his bicycle with a chipmunk he had hung with a rope and was swinging it round and acting weird. My brother and I were home alone, and it was one time I know that my brother was scared in. We kept the doors locked, and he peed in our grill and left. The whole time he was yelling, but I'm not sure that it was at us. Yeah, that young man probably had a lot going on both in his home life and in his own head. So although you may have been on the receiving end of all that, he wasn't just angry at you. Cripes. A few years ago, I went to a gas station late at night and ran into an old friend. A guy I knew who had been serving time for some heinous crap. I heard he got out and him and I were cool, so I didn't think much of it. He was with another guy, and right away the sight of the 2 of them sitting outside a gas station at a payphone made me uneasy. Teardrop tattoos on their faces and a desperate look about them. But my friend recognized me right away and came to say what's up. His friend immediately asked for a few dollars to get a cigar. I told him, hold up and I'll get him on my way out. The whole time in that store, I felt uneasy. It looked like they were looking for a lick, and I didn't want that to be me. So I brought a cigar and gave him like $3. I chatted for about 5 minutes with my old friend and asked about his brother and stuff. As I hopped in my car, his friend asked if they could get a ride down the street. I got in and started the car and said, nah, can't. He started to insist, but my friend interrupted him and said, nah, my man has somewhere to be. He's got a bunch of kids that are probably crying. About 2 weeks later, 2 bodies were found smoldering along a popular jogging trail. The convicted murderer was the guy, along with my friend. The bodies were found within walking distance of the gas station I saw them at. My friend self-deleted about a month later. Both of those guys confessed to friends and family that they didn't know how to act outside of jail, and that they didn't feel like they were ready to be out. They tried to check themselves into psych hospitals, complaining of hearing voices, but they were turned away. The bodies were 2 high school kids who stole their neighbors' weapons and were trying to sell them quickly to get some green herb, I believe. These guys robbed the kids and tied them up for days. This all happened about 5 blocks from where I was living, in a relatively safe neighborhood in Florida. Oh, and the person with my friend was Jesse Davis, one of the convicted murderers in the Cady Way trial murders. I knew 2. They both grew up next door to one another. One had emotional problems and could be a decent guy one-on-one. We hung out a bit and rode bikes occasionally. He killed a guy in a substance deal and stuffed the body down a well. The other was a great guy, but he didn't give an F about anyone outside his circle of friends and his family. We'd hunted and fished together every day. He once told me he couldn't feel remorse if he killed someone outside his family. I thought it was just talk. This year, his sister's husband started whacking her, and this guy ambushed him in a country road and blasted him to death. Still, a decent guy in my book. I knew a serial committer of the unspeakable act. He was my kid's assistant little league coach and a great dad, one of the coolest people I knew. He loved his kids, was at all of their events, and worked hard as a doctor to support his family. His arrest shocked the crap out of the whole neighborhood. My cousin went to school with Timothy McVeigh. She says he was a really creepy loner who'd talk about conspiracy theories all the time. Jonathan David Drew, convicted of taking the life of Houston waitress Tina Flood, 23, in December of 1998. Drew was pulled over by a police officer who found Flood beaten and barely alive in Drew's front passenger seat. She died soon afterwards. Drew is suspected of several instances of the unspeakable act, and a private investigator has speculated Drew could be responsible for the slaying of Jessica Lee Kane. A search of Drew's former home in League City, where his parents still lived, produced a vial containing several human teeth. Yep, Jonathan David Drew was good friends with several people I hung out with. I knew him as an acquaintance. There were stories of him getting stuck out in the killing fields on at least 2 occasions late at night and having to be towed out. He was only convicted of the one murder, but there is speculation he's responsible for several more. Not me, but a buddy of mine was friends with the Boston bomber at University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. He says they used to hang out, drink, and do normal college stuff together. One of those you'd never expect it kind of situations. The thing that still gets me is that when he fled the scene, he briefly went back to Dartmouth to do whatever he had to do. But while there, he hit the gym with my buddy, and the story was all over every news outlet on TV. He turns to my buddy at the gym and proceeds to tell him, "How could anyone do something like this?" My sister's best friend growing up. Her family was really strict growing up, and she kind of took that on with her son. Wouldn't let him watch regular TV, he was homeschooled and that kind of thing. So she gets married because she got pregnant, again because she did this with her son's dad, and they move away. She joins the army, he cheats while she's at boot camp, they break up. Then she moves with other relatives in Oregon, and eventually he moves there too to be closer to his kid. Breaks it off with the other girl. They start to co-parent well and get along again. Everything's okay. They go on a camping trip in the mountains for his birthday with her sister. Then her and the sister proceed to shoot him 13 times while he slept and dragged and threw his body off a cliff. They come home to try and cover it up with all fake Facebook alibis and receipts from some gas station and say he got lost in the woods. The Rangers find him 2 days later, and 2 days after that she's arrested along with her sister. Her sister flipped on her immediately and they gave her 18 months with time served. The main perp got life without parole. She said she did it to make sure he couldn't take her kids away. Now the kids live with family and have lost both parents. I always knew that family was off. In short, my sister's best friend planned and killed her ex-husband to protect the kids, and then threw him off a cliff, was found and convicted, and kids have no parents now. Someone told me they made an episode of Snapped Off for her story. So yeah, I guess I can say the name of the episode. It's Patricia McCallum. Cripes. Protecting kids here may have been code for ensuring we don't have to share custody anymore. As much as being a child of divorce sucks, I can't imagine that the fallout of that was any better, and I can't imagine that the co-parenting was so bad that it was even worth the risk of getting caught. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I dated and was friends with a guy who was arrested in a huge CP bust in my area. We'll call him John. He was a very sweet and kind guy, the kind who'd do just about anything for a friend. We met at a class and we hit it off right away, which led to a sort of relationship. We split on good terms, he had different ideas about relationships, so we broke up before anyone got too involved. We remained very good friends who'd just hang out every weekend, spend some time at each other's houses, playing video games, or just get into general messing around. About 3 months later, he started dating a girl from his job and took her on vacation to New York City. They'd only been dating for a few weeks, but in true fashion, he was head over heels for her. He sent me a picture of them, and the girl looked so young I asked if he saw her ID before they'd done the deed. He proudly told me she had just turned 19. He was 43. They split up after she'd spent the weekend at his place, and her father came looking for her. Her father went ballistic, and that was the end of it. I started putting the pieces together, and I realized I was looking at one gigantic red flag. I was 27 when we were dating, but he always loved to play up how young I looked. He was also very into age play during the deed, which was one of the reasons we split. He started dating other girls between the ages of 18 and 21, but they all had the same hallmark of definitely not looking like the age of consent, to the point that they were usually stopped from entering clubs or bars because the bouncers assumed the girls had fake IDs or borrowed an older relative's ID. He started drinking more, picking up working girls, going into massage parlors, and being all around that creepy old guy. He chalked it up to going through a rough patch, but there was something still very off about him. He went to New York City with another girl and asked me and another mutual friend to watch his house for the week. I got a frantic phone call from my friend saying that John's house had been broken into and all of his electronics were stolen. At the time, I was mid-move and John had allowed me to store several boxes of electronics at his place after the storage facility I had them in had been broken into. I went over and sure enough, all of John's TVs, computers, game systems, and other things were gone. But my things were left alone. I found that odd because I had a flat-screen TV and a flat-screen computer in their boxes sitting in his dining room. If he had been robbed, why didn't they take my things? When the cops showed up, all they'd tell us is that it wasn't a burglary, but wouldn't give us any more information. That's when I found the search warrant on his kitchen table. John came back from New York City and he asked me to drive him to the state trooper station. All he'd say was that he got a phone call asking him to show up there. Once there, he was immediately arrested. They met us in the parking lot and yanked him out of my car before I had a chance to put it into park. One of the detectives asked me to come to the station and they interviewed me, asking how I knew him and so on and so forth. After about an hour, they let me go outside to have a cigarette. That's when they told me he was being arrested for 22 counts of downloading and distributing loads of CP. They also told me it had been going on for a very long time, long enough that surveillance on his house had pictures of me coming and going. So yeah, that's my story. Sorry it's so long. I dated someone who murdered a guy with his friends. It was personal and it made national news. A few months after he and I broke up, I was dating someone else. He called me and said that he was never going to be with me because he messed everything up. I was busy and I blew him off. A week later, after a holiday, I got a call from the jail, but it was at 4 in the morning and I accidentally hung up. A few years later, I looked him up and realized the call was him. I'm afraid that he holds a grudge, and as his release creeps closer, I'm getting worried. So what was he like before? He was melodramatic. After we broke up, he called me and played Cry Me a River and told me that we were just like the song. He beat himself up quite a lot. Everything was a huge deal. We argued a lot and he was easily influenced. He didn't have a good relationship with his parents, so his friends were all he had. He had a history of disciplinary actions in school. Respect was a huge thing. Feeling disrespected to him was the worst thing in the world. He didn't care about school. He was funny. This guy isn't famous, not yet anyway. All this happened just about a month ago. Maybe a little longer. The guy's name is Adam Densmore. He killed his girlfriend and cut her into pieces. He put the body in a couple of suitcases and took their 1-year-old daughter on the road. I always thought he was an intelligent guy, but apparently he wasn't the smartest, as he immediately drove from where he was living in Colorado to his hometown in northwest Louisiana, straight to his parents' house. He dropped the suitcases in 2 separate locations along the way. Someone found one of them and he was arrested. As far as I know, they still haven't found the other suitcase. I knew him, but not very well. We used to frequent the same bar. He'd sit in the corner with a beer and read. He was rude to anyone who tried to speak to him. He had that whole, "Can't you see I'm reading?" attitude. In most cases, I understand that attitude, but not in a bar. Never made sense to me. We talked a few times, but only talked at length once. I remember it being an enjoyable conversation. He was intelligent and well-spoken. Also, a good-looking guy, but not exactly charming. One thing I remember is that he'd say, "gods," in place of, "oh my god." I know he lived somewhere near me because I'd see him walking around the neighborhood on occasion with a big walking stick. So yeah, he was a bit of a strange guy, but I was shocked when I heard about what happened. It still feels weird to realize I know someone who would do something like that. Okay, mine wasn't famous, but it was still messed up. Brett Pearson was high on crystal and killed his mother and also injured his father. He cried crocodile tears and acts like he regrets it, but I knew him and I know for a fact that he doesn't regret a thing. I went to school with him for a few years. Myself and others were both repeatedly intimidated by him in both stalking and violent manners. There was just something off about him. The only friends he had were the problem kids and the major buttholes at school. He'd make super inappropriate comments in class towards teachers and joked about school mass tragedies and would say things just for shock value. But he was a charmer and got away with everything. I know for a fact he doesn't regret killing his mom. The murder happened only a few blocks from my house. I think the part of this that I'm having the hardest time relating to the rest was that he was apparently charming enough to get away with this stuff. But then again, Ted Bundy was a whole thing, wasn't he? So maybe this guy is the crystal-addicted version of him. Sounds like a creep. I'm glad he's put away now. Oh, and speaking of the big, charming, handsome psychopath himself, here he is in the next story. Obligatory not me, but my mum saw Ted Bundy running through the woods after he escaped prison. They realized who it was after the cops came searching door to door. Not directly, but I know several people who knew Willie Picton before he was arrested. I worked with a lady that had her husband murdered. She was a bossy, condescending, arrogant piece of white trash. Rather nicely attractive though, and very openly flirtatious. She was about 15 years older, but I'd be lying if I said I hadn't thought about it. Wasn't surprised when they finally nailed her for the crime. Everyone suspected she did it. I sat next to Jeffrey Dahmer at a bar in Milwaukee. I guess I just wasn't to his taste. My boyfriend and his friend kidnapped 2 people, drove them out to a field, and blasted them execution style. He was a really good guy except for that whole killing thing, but we were young and impulsive. I often think about reaching out to him, but time changes people, prison changes people, and I'm not quite sure what I'd say. I was taught in a pottery class by Margaret Bain and good friends with Stephen Bain when growing up in Papua New Guinea. I don't remember anything unusual about any of the family, but I remember vividly reading in the newspaper in Papua New Guinea about their deaths in New Zealand. Still not 100% clear whether it was just Stephen's dad or his brother as well that committed the murders. I didn't know the killer, but as adults, I met a guy and we became friends. It took him a few weeks to tell me he had changed his surname as everyone knew his brother, and he felt he'd be judged the same. At the time of the murder, it was classed as one of the most foul in Australian history. He told me even though his brother was locked up, he was scared of him, and he talked about the constant mental, physical, and other unspeakable treatment the children in the family had suffered growing up by his father and cohorts. His brother liked to do a lot of illegal stuff with animals, which was a forewarning of what he'd become. I lost contact with my friend when he moved interstate, and I've tried to find him, because I miss him. I worked with the man who made national news for killing a doctor who worked in a clinic. When I knew him, he was quiet, polite, a nice guy as far as working with him, but he got in with the pro-life people, and if I recall correctly, he was having marital trouble at the time. One of his co-workers had asked him to work a shift for him that day, but he declined, saying he had something to do. Well, we all sure found out what he did. It was pretty shocking, really. Extended family member murdered 2 people and was suspected of murdering another. He and his mother and siblings lived with us for a few months when we were very young children, so young that I only have vague memories of this. It was while his mother was trying to leave her very nasty husband. The husband was a real animal and probably had something to do with the guy turning out the way he did. And what was our main character like? Well, as a young kid, he was just your typical child. Maybe enjoyed getting other people in trouble a bit more than most, but that's about it. As a teen and young adult, he was a very scary character. You'd get a real menacing vibe from him, like he was completely unpredictable. Which was strange because he always acted very calm. You just had this sense that there was way more going on under the surface. As a family member, I always felt safe around him. Strange to say that, I know, but I still always felt like he couldn't be trusted around others. Plus, even though instinctively I felt safe, rationally I knew most likely I wasn't, so I made sure I was never alone with him. You could tell there was something not quite right about him. We were all a little relieved when he died suddenly, still quite young. Eventually, he would have paroled out and someone else would have probably died. Gary M. Heidnick used to frequent a bar popular with veterans that my grandfather met his friends at a few times a month. He was usually quiet, and on Christmas Eve, my grandfather's friend brought the guy a beer and talked to him for a few minutes, thinking he might be a guy with PTSD. Came back and said, "There's a screw loose with that guy." Few weeks later, he got into a fight with someone and my grandfather helped the bartender throw him out. He never came back. When did you walk out of a movie theater and why? I worked at a theater in the late 80s and we had Mystic Pizza. We didn't sell very many tickets to it, and then about 20 minutes in, most everyone would come out demanding their money back. The manager would wait at the door with passes filled out waiting for them. Never could figure out why everyone was so mad about that movie. What's so horrible about it? I've never really heard of it before, but it has a 6.2 on IMDb and a 78% on Rotten Tomatoes. It doesn't look like my cup of tea at all, but it also doesn't look like the kind of thing people would walk out of in droves. I've never seen it, but I believe Mystic Pizza is a pizzeria in Mystic, Connecticut. If people didn't know this, they might be expecting a movie about magical pizza, which sounds awesome. Dinosaur. I was screaming and crying because I was scared of the dinosaurs. My dad dragged me out of the theater. My dad brought me and my brothers to see Jurassic Park in the theaters at 9 p.m. After the T-Rex ate the lawyer, I spent the rest of the movie in the hall crying and terrified. I had nightmares for weeks. My dad and brothers watched the rest of the movie and didn't even check on me. Little girl sobbing in the hallway of a movie theater. Yep, good times. My dad, my 11-year-old sister, and my 21-year-old self thought it would be nice to take my grandma out to dinner and a movie for her birthday. There was a light-hearted comedy in theaters at the time about a grandson who fell on hard times and had to move in with his grandmother, and hijinks ensue. We took my super conservative 87-year-old Christian grandmother to see Grandma's Boy. I think we made it to the point where Alex tickles his pickle in the bathroom before Grandma loudly proclaimed everyone in the theater was going to hell and we had to leave. Still one of my favorite movies to this day. Always think about her when I watch it.
I had a guy in high school take me to this on our first date, with his mother sitting right next to us. We got through the whole movie, uncomfortable as heck, and afterwards his mother was so angry. She ended up telling him that I was no good for him if I was able to sit through that filth. I was offended by that, so I took his virginity and dated him for a year.
The narrator has now Googled this film, and he's not sure what's funnier. The fact that a solidly not good film is one of someone's favorites, or the fact that someone else lost their virginity to said same complete B-comedy film for green herb users. It's funny as heck, to be honest. It wasn't my choice, but when I was a kid, I went to watch Austin Powers' The Spy Who Shagged Me with my mum and my friend. My mum was already pretty disgusted with the movie during the first 20 minutes. The tipping point for her was when Fat Man was lying in bed with Heather Graham and she puts that little tracker thing up his butt. My mum got furious and said we weren't watching any more of it and we walked into Star Wars Episode 1 instead. Go figure. And I'll clarify, my mum doesn't speak English well, she's from Mexico, so she didn't know anything about the movie and doesn't know what shag means to this day. My parents walked me out of Jumanji as a kid because I couldn't emotionally handle Robin Williams getting hurt. I walked out of Captain America: The Winter Soldier. No, not because it's a bad movie, but because the popcorn machine exploded and the theater caught on fire. Fun times! I had to leave during Titanic. My friend that I was there with began crying hysterically once the ship began sinking and declared she couldn't watch the rest. I was kind of annoyed since it's not like it was a surprise that the ship was going to sink. I only left with her because she was simply inconsolable and making a scene at that point.
I saw that movie with my mom, who's from Mexico City. And surprisingly, this was a point of history that she had missed out on. The second I heard, "Hey, Stephen, the boat is sinking, and there are not enough lifeboats," was when I knew this was going to be a pretty rough cinematic experience for my mom. I watched it with my mom as well, and she's from Peru, and when the boat started sinking and the people started to drop, she started laughing hysterically. Everyone was gasping or silent, and here's this Latin lady laughing at the death of all these people because she thought it was funny how they dropped off and plopped into the water. Sacha, these people are falling down.
Watching that thing sink is the reason I did like that movie. The love story's generic as heck, and the old lady just sucks. But I could watch that boat sink all day. Plus, the propeller dude. Bless James Cameron for the propeller dude. Boom. I knew a guy who'd made 2 combat landings with the Marines in World War II, Saipan and Okinawa, and he had to walk out of Saving Private Ryan at the Omaha Beach scene. Oh man, here's my time to shine. So my wife and I have very different tastes in movies. For example, she likes every single Hallmark Christmas movie, despite each one having the same fricking plot. Single but empowered woman stumbles into a new situation during Christmas, meets guy who is not her type but rocks her worldview. Christmas magic, fall in love. So we rarely see movies together because of this. Fury Road? Saw it by myself. The only good movie we've recently seen together was Inside Out because we both love Disney and Pixar films. Anyways, back in 2014, we decided to go on a double date with some friends of ours. I tell her she can pick the movie for once because I picked the restaurant, because we also differ on food tastes. She picks Endless Love. From the start, this movie is a train wreck. It's literally the most cliched piece of garbage some movie exec could think up. It's like they dumped every romance trope into a brainstorming meeting and the execs had a field day. Yeah, we'll cast this hot guy and this hot girl. The kids will like that. Hot people sell. Can they act? Who gives a crap? I mean, this thing just spirals out of fricking control by Act 2. I can't remember all the details, but there's a terminal illness subplot that never gets resolved, and the main girl's brother, oh my. Here's something I do remember. The girl says, "I have no friends for my high school grad party because I'm too rich and goody-goody." The guy says, "It's all good, girl. I'm brooding, but I'll call the police on another party to get those people over to your party." The party starts, and the weird brother from college says, "I've got a cool college game to play. Let's draw songs out of a hat and you pick a partner and go off for a little bit and then come back and sing a duet of the song." I mean, who the frick has ever heard of that game? How is this a remotely fun party game? Anyway, the movie is bad. People are laughing at parts that aren't meant to be funny because it's so over-the-top drama acting. Near the end, my wife whispers to me, "I'm so sorry." Then it happens. One guy stands up and throws up his hands before leaving with his girlfriend following him out. The exodus has begun. Slowly, people start leaving. If they're not, it's because they're high school students probably making out in the back row. My wife even gets up to leave, and the other couple with us join her. She's shocked that I said that I'm staying. I'm now so enraptured in this piece of crap movie that I have to see how these dumb writers try to wrap things up. In the end, I finished the whole thing while they go to get coffee. When the lights come up, I stand and begin applauding to the shock of the 10 people left in the theater. I feel like I've been trolled by Hollywood. I now own 10 copies of this movie on DVD and I gift them out to friends solely to have someone else to talk about how bad this movie is. You, sir, are a hero for your commitment to enjoying the garbage film that you paid for, and I'm sure every person in that theater remembered you for a long time afterwards. My only irritation is that you gave 10 DVDs worth of your money to it and might have contributed on a greater scale than most to Hollywood execs thinking that people wanted more of that kind of garbage in the future. What to expect when you're expecting. It wasn't what I expected. The third Twilight film. I was forced to go by my then girlfriend. The cinema flooded about 40 minutes in, so we got evacuated. I was so happy. I walked out during Last House on the left. Turns out, a rough scene of the unspeakable act is not what you want to see when two 16-year-olds go on a date. My first movie date with my ex was Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I had heard all this hype about the book, so I was excited to see it. Yeah, no one told me about that scene either. Wow, that was a first date movie for me too. I left in that part because I had no idea there was that kind of scene, and the guy that I was on a date with was already way creepier in person than his texts had let on. It was not a good vibe. Walked out on Batman: The Dark Knight. The movie started and it was way too loud. Eardrum-burstingly loud. I know I wasn't the only one because anytime there was a sound above two people talking, the entire theater would flinch or cover their ears. I went to the manager to let him know and he sighed and said he'd take care of it. A few minutes later, the movie was turned down so quiet that you couldn't hear anyone talking. Every person in the audience would turn their head or lean in when it was quiet. So I let the manager know again, to which he sighed and angrily stomped off. I realized he wasn't sighing because some high school kid didn't know what he was doing. He was angry at me for bothering him. Went back in and the movie was louder than before. I said F it and demanded my money back. At first he refused, and then about 50 people showed up behind me, all demanding the same thing. I saw the movie the same day in another theater and it was perfect. Good movie. Heath Ledger was amazing. I wanted desperately to walk out of The Last Airbender, but that would have meant waiting outside in the rain for an hour for my mum to come pick me up. After finishing the film, I wish I'd sat in the rain. Gamer. My mum took me as a surprise, thinking it was going to be a perfect movie for me. I was in the 6th grade. No point in walking out. Once or twice I've decided to take a nap though. I rarely find the time for a good nap. Batman and Robin. We walked out and saw Men in Black. It was much better. A movie called The Fog. Ooh, the fog kills people. Then stay out of the frickin' fog. It's the 2005 one. Not to be confused with The Mist. If you haven't seen that, it's really good. Don't read anything about it, just watch it, and then maybe report back after. Holy crap, everyone keeps talking about how good The Mist was, and I've been thinking, what? That movie was so bad. Nothing in the movie was good except for when the credits rolled. I think I've been thinking about The Fog the entire time. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. The opening night for The Dark Knight Rises. It wasn't the movie itself, which I loved, but there was this one Joker that messed it up for everyone. I'll never understand why people can't sit down, shut up, and let everyone else watch the movie they've paid for. Anyway, this guy must have seen the movie in advance and kept loudly dropping spoilers. I specifically went to the premiere because I wanted to see it before anyone else had a chance to ruin it for me by telling me what happened. So I cut my losses, left, and came back to watch it the next night. I thought this was going in a much darker direction. Same here, I was braced for it. After messed it up for everyone, I was like, oh crap. In case anyone needs an update on tragic film events from 12 years ago, there was a premiere of The Dark Knight Rises where, unfortunately, someone decided to bring in several weapons and commit a massacre in one of the screenings. The narrator will also admit to getting nervous that the author was speaking about that event. Oof. My friend's dad took us to see South Park, bigger, longer, and uncut. He decided it was too vulgar for us about 20 minutes in, we were 12, and he decided to take us to Hooters instead. 9 out of 10 would do again. Super Babies, Baby Geniuses 2. I was with a friend who was desperate to see it for some frickin' reason. About 40 minutes into it, I reached my limit. I stood up and said, I'll be outside having a smoke, see you when it's over. Rude? Maybe, but I really couldn't handle one more second of that crap fest. Wife and I went to see Daredevil. Turns out we accidentally went into the wrong theater, which was showing How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. We were both looking at each other thinking, this is an awfully strange opening to Daredevil. Once we figured it out, we left and went to the right theater, but in retrospect, we should have just stayed where we were. Not me, but my mom walked out of the first Matrix. She and my aunt had no idea it was a sci-fi movie, and at the beginning of the scene in the car where they rip the thing out of Neo's chest, these two burst out laughing and left the theater. It's hard to remember through 16 years of knowing all about what the Matrix is, but it was because of marketing. They specifically made the previews just showing action, but no explanation. What is the Matrix was the catchphrase. If you're of the right frame of mind, this really worked for you. My friend said I had to see it back in '99 when we went. When Neo woke up in that pod, my freaking head exploded. It's like the Darth Vader and Skywalker thing. I had a rare afternoon off while on tour in Paris, and I decided to see a movie. I brought the ticket, brought some popcorn, sweets, a big drink, and other things. I walked into the theater, sat down, and then promptly got back up again and walked out. In a moment of blithering stupidity, I totally forgot I was in Paris and the movie was in French. I can't speak French. When the 6th Harry Potter movie came out, we had to pretty much drag my friend to see it. He's a military guy who hates fantasy movies. I was shocked he even agreed to go, albeit reluctantly. One of the first lines of the movie was, "Okay, Harry, wand at the ready," and he loudly scoffed. About 10 minutes into the movie, while Harry and Dumbledore were attempting to recruit Slughorn, a lone chair sat in the room of an empty house. I whispered to my friend, "He's the chair." His response was, "If he's the chair, I'm leaving." Sure enough, Dumbledore prodded the chair with his wand. Slughorn's head popped up, exclaiming, "Merlin's beard!" And my friend kept his word. I remember thinking that the movie was alright, and I saw it as an adult, but gosh darn if that description doesn't make it sound like the stupidest thing imaginable. I once took a girl on a first date to go and see The Aristocrats. The Paul Provenza documentary about the alleged dirtiest joke ever told. Personally, I love that stuff, but she was so thoroughly unimpressed that I felt embarrassed after the first 30 minutes and we left. She didn't laugh, smile, or say anything from the start of the film until I dropped her off at her place. We never spoke again. I actually got to meet Paul Provenza a few years later and told him the story. He thought it was pretty funny and gave me some great advice. He said roughly the equivalent to, "Don't sweat it. If a girl can't laugh at something like that, she's not the right one for you anyway." A few years after that, I watched it again with my then-girlfriend, and we both laughed non-stop through the whole thing. She's now my wife. In short, first date disaster watching The Aristocrats. Watched it again later in life with a new girlfriend and then married her. I had to walk out on Passion of the Christ when my sister threw up in the middle of the movie. There was a priest in the theater, and his reaction to it had me in more stitches than Jesus on my way to the car.
It's so surreal watching that movie when it came out in theaters packed with uber-religious folks who were watching it as if it were a documentary. At one of the points where Jesus was getting beaten to a pulp, this weeping woman in the movie theater cried out, "You B-words." I had to stifle laughter because it made me think of South Park.
I was the cause of a guy walking out of a movie once. His name was Mark, and the movie theater was the Marquee. So for the rest of middle and high school, anytime we wanted to leave early, we'd ask to pull a Marquee Mark. Thought I was on a date with a girl, and she ended up inviting Mark because they'd been talking as well. I ended up going for the handhold during the movie. Middle school, I know. He saw this, called his mother, and got up saying he was going to the bathroom and never came back. Best part of this was my other friend who drove us had to sit through it to drive me home, and Marky Mark is some guy none of us know and had to deal with the whole situation and awkward rejection. She broke up with me 2 days later because I exited the window she was browsing during computer class as a joke. How is that a joke? I don't know either, so don't bother asking. She seemed like the rational type anyway. This was the most middle school story that has ever middle schooled. I'll admit that up until my first reread, I didn't catch your part about middle school, and my imagination was afire thinking that this was just the most hilariously childish workplace or college class in the world. Oh well, hopefully we will get a story of that nature sometime in the future. Dad and I went to see War of the Worlds. I thought it was really dull, so I looked over to see if Dad thought the same so we could leave. And he looked properly into the film, so I didn't say anything and watched the rest of it. Afterwards, Dad said that he was glad that I enjoyed the film as he hadn't and wanted to leave. He had done the same thing that I'd done and thought I was enjoying it. I never walked out even if the movie was crap. $10 and more for a ticket I'll fricking endure. I do know about the sunk cost fallacy. I guess I just never experienced a movie so bad that I wanted to leave the theater. You're all talking about wasting time, but if you go to the movies in the first place, you probably had some time to waste anyway. If you absolutely hate it, then fine, go get a refund. Marley and Me. The only movie I've ever walked out on, and it was because I was sobbing like a B-word towards the end, with 15 to 20 minutes left to go, and I couldn't stand to watch another minute of that emotional torture. The fourth Indiana Jones film. I walked out and went into Speed Racer and walked out of that too. It was a bad day at the cinema. I didn't walk out. I would intentionally go to see terrible movies. Why? I won 52 free tickets one year, and when my girlfriend at the time would do her photography classes, I'd go and see a bad movie in an empty theater and kill 2 hours by sleeping in the cinema if there was nothing good out that I hadn't seen already. The weekend staff got to know me and would tell me which movie had the least tickets sold so I wouldn't be disturbed. The Box, starring Cameron Diaz and James Marsden. It was aggressively nonsensical. I saw that movie with a friend and her whacked-out group for my friend's birthday. They were the typical teenagers making noise with their phones all out. No one in the half-full theater complained. Some people joined us and a couple of people walked out. Yep. 2 weeks' notice. I was a teenager with my first serious girlfriend. The movie was an excuse to get together. We bought tickets to show the stub if asked by parents. We walked in and stood up and left 10 minutes later to go make out in the car. No idea if the movie was any good, but I got to see a naked girl in person for the first time that night, so I rate it as one of the best movies of all time.
This is hands down the best reason to walk out of a movie theater.
Wild Hogs. I don't feel that an explanation is warranted. That Frankenstein movie with Sting in it. Walked out and I saw Weird Science instead. Yeah, I'm old. Napoleon Dynamite. I saw it with my family over Thanksgiving holiday and walked out about halfway through thinking we wasted our money. Woke up the next day and couldn't stop quoting it, so we went and saw it again. Now it's one of my favorites. My dad walked out of the cinema during Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone because it was, in his words, complete bollocks. I almost walked out of The Lady in the Water, but it was just so bad that we couldn't leave. I walked out once. It was during the Ender's Game movie. I'm able to separate my movie experience from when I read a book, but this movie was so horrible. It was appalling that it went by the same name. It doesn't help that Ender's Game and its ensuing series were some of my favorite books. I couldn't stand to watch another minute of it. I understand the merits the movie has. I also try to separate the movie and the book as much as possible when I watch them. However, I read Ender's Game and Speaker for the Dead 3 days after my grandfather, who loved them, died. Those books were an escape for me. In another low point of my life, I read the Bean sub-series, and that series is the only one to make me cry. I am unabashedly attached to these books, and I couldn't stand the movie. Overthinkers. What was your most satisfying "told you so" moment? My boyfriend, who has zero history of seizures, narrowly escaped dying from one because my overthinking led me to break into his house when he didn't answer the phone. My overthinking had begun a few nights prior. He mentioned that he bit his tongue in his sleep and woke up with a bloody pillow and sore mouth, but he had no memory of it happening. That, for some reason, led my overthinking brain to question, wow, did he have a seizure and just not realize it? He has zero history of seizures, and we'd been together multiple years. Didn't live together, but spent nights together. And I had never seen a hint of a seizure. But for some reason, this stuck in my mind. Fast forward 2 days. We usually don't hang out in the morning because he likes to sleep in late. But on this day, we had an appointment to go and see a specific dog at the shelter that I was thinking of adopting. He wouldn't answer the phone that morning. I called multiple times before I went to his place, but he never picked up. I started getting a bad feeling, but I quelled the "he's having a seizure" thought because that was so clearly unlikely, and meanwhile I was making an action plan for that very scenario. I got to his house and he wouldn't answer, so in a completely not me crazy girlfriend move, I climbed over his fence. Luckily, his door was unlocked. I found him unconscious and unresponsive, lying on his back with the sticky remnants of foam all around his mouth. I jumped into action. I rolled him on his side to help curb aspiration, put a pillow under his shoulder to keep him in that position, and called the ambulance. Had I not hopped the fence to get in? Had I not driven over when he didn't pick up the phone? Had we not had plans to meet up hours earlier than we usually did? He would have been dead by lunch. His kidneys were already shutting down by the time we reached the ER. If he had never mentioned biting his tongue in his sleep, I don't think I would have been overthinking at all. No crazy worries about seizures would have pushed me to go over the edge and find him. Turns out to be a weird brain disease that's bizarrely endemic to New Mexico, kind of cerebral cavernous malformations. Several days later, after we got home from the hospital, I got a call from a friend who said the dog, against all odds, was still at the shelter, as in the very dog we were supposed to be seeing that day. I'd given up hope on getting her and pushed it out of my priorities while my boyfriend was hospitalized, but they'd forgotten to take down my 24-hour hold sign on her cage, so no one inquired about her. She's now our miracle dog and is the sweetest animal I've ever owned. My boyfriend wouldn't be alive today if we hadn't made an appointment to meet her. Is this going to be that category of video that turns us all into paranoid weirdos? Because if there are more stories like this, my head is going to be on a fricking swivel and interpreting any physical irregularities in my friends as grave medical conditions. I always carry a small sewing kit whenever I go to a wedding. I've sewed 2 brides into their dresses so far. I worked weddings for a while, during an age, 26 to 28, where a lot of my friends were getting married. I've helped to bustle pretty much every bride whose wedding I attended, including brides who I didn't know very well, who were either friends of my husband or were getting married to a groom that I was close friends with. At work, I had one of those craft supply organizers full to the brim of emergency supplies, pins, safety bobby and straight pins, hair ties, earring backs, a sewing kit, pain relievers, Tums, and granola bars. Sometimes you just need to get the bride to eat something. Chalk works great for covering up minor stains on white dresses, hairspray, makeup remover wipes, superglue band-aids, blister bandages, you name it. People were always pleasantly surprised when they needed something random, and I was just like, yep, I've got that, here you go. All the teachers at the middle school I taught at knew that I was a pack rat, and one day a kid split his pants, and the school counselor came to me and said, "Mr. Smith, would you happen to have a pair of sweats or gym pants in your truck?" Yep. So the kid spent the rest of the day in a pair of nylon pants I had behind my seat. He's lucky, because if he didn't fit, he would have spent the rest of the day in a white disposable coverall in case I had car trouble in nice clothes. The icing on the cake, it was a student I really liked who was super helpful to other kids and teachers, so it was nice to do something nice for him. I also carried a Swiss Army brand soft-side briefcase stuffed with a few of each size of every battery. One day, Phil Niekro and 2 Braves players were there for an assembly, and Phil's mic battery was dying, so I sprinted upstairs to my classroom, grabbed a 9-volt from my bag, and then basically rolled across the panel and switched out his battery and got back to the PA, avoiding getting on TV news cameras. I was at one of those trampoline parks with my kid when I looked over and saw several of the workers attending to an elderly lady sitting on the floor. It turns out she'd taken a shot to the forehead somehow and was bleeding profusely. They were trying to help with paper towels. Well, I'd taken a free local Stop the Bleed class, just in case, and I've since kept supplies in my truck. I asked if they needed some gauze and a bandage and went and got it and brought it back. I told the guy, now, if one piece of gauze fills up, and he interrupted, take it off and put on a new one. And I said, no, you put another one over top that one but leave the bottom one there. And he said, well, you know more than I do. Come over and help. And we were able to get her patched up. If anyone else wants to take a 90-minute Stop the Bleed class, they're free and likely in your local area. Stay safe out there, guys. I didn't actually plan for this, it just worked out. But one day, for some reason, I put a suction cup in my pocket. I don't exactly remember why, it was from a shower hook that I think I broke, and I put it in my pocket hoping to find a replacement or something else. Later that day, I was standing around with a few friends, and one friend was lamenting that his bumper was dented. He showed us and said, I bet I could pop it right out if I had like a suction cup or something. I wordlessly pulled the suction cup out of my pocket and handed it to him. Everyone definitely thought I was creepy as heck. Not me, but my mother. Apparently at a party where my parents and their friends were playing board games, there was a realization that an hourglass was missing from one of the games they planned on playing. My mother proceeded to reach into her purse and pull out an hourglass she just so happened to bring, on the off chance they didn't have one. However, later in the night, when some drinks had been had, someone accidentally slammed a drink down, breaking my mother's hourglass. Without missing a beat, she reached into her purse and pulled out another hourglass. She knew the first one, being glass, might get broken, so she had a backup ready. Imagine how the guy who wanted to go home felt when he broke the hourglass and suddenly there was another one, especially after hitting the very first one. When my son was still a baby, we had to take an 11-hour flight. As an overthinker, I bought at least 25 diapers for him to go through. He didn't need that many. But the mum sitting close to us was very grateful when she ran out of diapers, not even halfway through the flight, and I gave her a few. Ah yes, the little brown fountains never let up below a certain age. I was kinda shaken when my friends told me how quickly they went through one big pack. New parents, you're truly living through your own version of the Blitz every day. It's just that what's raining down against you is more liquid. This was at 9 years old. We'd driven home and seen the beginning wisps of smoke for the California Cedar Fire in 2003. Naturally, I assumed the worst and packed up all of my clothes and spent about an hour making a travel cage for my guinea pigs. I tied their water bottle to the side so they could drink, packed up their food and their favorite furniture just in case. I then spent the next few hours monitoring the fire on the news and out in the distance from our window, periodically asking my parents if we needed to evacuate. At some point in the night, the fire sped up like crazy and was literally on the hillside across the street. I went into my parents' room and said, "The fire is across the street, are you sure we shouldn't evacuate?" At this point, we all went crazy grabbing important documents and supplies as we were about to lock the doors and drive, and then I realized I forgot my guinea pigs. My parents told me it was too late and I didn't have time to grab them, but when I cried and explained I had them packed up, I was able to grab them and go. The house ended up okay thanks to a neighbor putting out embers before they took, but we were gone for a long enough time that my pigs wouldn't have made it without feeding. In short, I helped save my family and pets from a fire because I was an anxious child. Jeez, you were a smart 9-year-old. When September 11th happened, my brother, who was 5 at the time, began packing a bag in case we had those kinds of people attack us. He packed the essentials like his teddy bears, a VHS copy of The Phantom Menace, his favorite toy cars, and a random book my dad was reading. He would have single-handedly saved Western civilization. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I've never told anyone this, but when I was in middle school and going through puberty, I used to be terrified of popping a stiff one and my fly being down accidentally. Like, I would be up in front of the class and then randomly get solid and it would just pop out my fly, in front of the whole class. It's making me laugh just typing this out. You know that episode of South Park where Jimmy keeps getting randomly rigid? That was basically my life. Usually I'd just tuck it in my waistband and wait for the storm to settle, but I still had a huge fear of it popping out my fly because I forgot to zip it up. So what did I do? I started wearing my boxers backwards, so that even if I forgot to zip up my fly, my eggplant wouldn't be exposed. It was a pain to use the urinals, but honestly, I got used to it pretty quickly. Flash forward a couple of months and I was at the movies with a big gathering of people. It was basically a big group of girls and my group of guy friends. Each guy and girl were paired up and made sure to sit next to each other. I was paired with a girl I had a huge crush on. We shared a popcorn and soda and it was a huge moment for me. Briefly into the movie, I got one of those damn random rock-hard Richards and I quickly but discreetly stood up and did the old waistband tuck. Then I sat back down and I could feel it pop out through my zipper. Thankfully, my backwards boxers kept it from saying hello to my date, but I still panicked and had to cover it up in a hurry. She noticed, I think, but we can all agree that a 6th grade boy's upright Johnson hiding under a layer of underwear is better than just sprouting out bare in the middle of a crowded movie theater. Also, she never said anything to her friends about it. Shout out to Stephanie for not mocking me with her friends. Went through a stage as a teenager where I thought I was psychic. I know, stupid. A friend asked me jokingly to make a prediction. I told him to get a flashlight because tomorrow would be dark. I grabbed one myself when I got home and put it in my purse. No idea why, just did it. The next day, the Eastern Seaboard blackouts happened. He still asks for predictions to this day. I was supposed to get married at the end of May last year. At the beginning of the year, before any of the pandemic stuff happened, I became obsessed with thinking about all the things that could go wrong and how we'd lose our money spent on the event. As a result, I purchased a very high coverage insurance policy for the event. As luck would have it, this kind of insurance had no clause that prevented collecting if there was a pandemic. We got all of our money back. I'm also a germaphobe, so I already stockpiled masks, gloves, Lysol wipes, and hand sanitizer. In college, on occasion, upperclassmen would randomly steal the underclassmen's towels from the shower stalls and then lock their room doors, so they had to go to the RA undressed. I had the idea to stash a towel in the drop-ceiling tiles for just that event. Maybe a week later, I became the victim of a towel snatching. However, the upperclassmen were very unhappy to see me strut out with a nice clean towel from my ceiling stash. That is such a specific thing to be paranoid about and prepared for, but what do I know, I guess, because you were able to actively save yourself from some embarrassment. They either thought that you were a freaking magician or that you carried 2 towels into the shower. I carry a fire extinguisher in my automobile. I witnessed a car accident where the engine caught fire. I quickly put it out before it burned the inside of the car. Everyone survived. I always keep an unopened deck of cards in my backpack. You can never tell when some hold'em may be needed to pass the time. But when I was at a business conference, the bigwig who was presenting to us was having to wing it with a few things because his luggage had been lost, and he didn't have all of his materials. He had the PowerPoint deck, but he didn't have his props. He started going into explaining how he'd be able to demonstrate his statistical principle he was describing, only he didn't have the unopened deck of cards he needed. Voila! I was able to produce a shrink-wrapped deck of cards. My boss was also in the same presentation, and he was also impressed that I just happened to have a deck of cards on me, so that's nice too. I found a nickel-sized lump on my 15-month-old daughter's temple. I freaked out, obsessed over it, researched it exhaustively, and concluded that it was a dermoid cyst that had worn through the skull. I was told by a pediatrician that it was a bone bruise that would fix itself over the course of 3 to 6 months. No imaging was needed, and I shouldn't make an appointment at the children's hospital because it would resolve on its own. I got an X-ray done anyway, and the radiologist confirmed every one of my suspicions, but the pediatrician still said to wait and see because that's what you do with dermoid cysts, and it was definitely not through the skull despite what the radiologist said. Made an appointment at the hospital anyway, and the surgeon swore up and down that although it was a dermoid cyst as I'd suspected, it would not be through the skull, since in all of his years of practice it never had been. Well, guess what? It was through the skull, and it was pressing on the membrane between the skull and the brain, a hair's breadth from breaking the membrane or pressing on the brain. A couple more weeks of waiting, and my daughter would have had seizures, a brain infection, and lasting damage. I overthought it, and now she's a happy, healthy 3-year-old. I carry scissors in my glove compartment. They came in handy when a kid tightened a skinny zip tie around my 9-year-old daughter's finger at a park, completely cut off the circulation. Also, the other kid's mum was a nurse, so that was helpful too. Carry scissors and a nurse at all times. One time, I way overthought a concern I had around dryer vent fire. When the time came that we had a clog and didn't know, and there was a wee burst of flames, I was fricking ready. To add, I did clean the lint trap religiously. I just had a gut feeling. I bought one of those things from Amazon to clean it and nothing came out, so don't let that fool you. If your drying times are up and there's sometimes a smell, call someone or check out every possible location. We found basically Brillo pads of burnt hair inside the heating element. Stay safe, pals. I'm an amateur clarinetist. I've played in the local orchestra and the like. My son was in the high school band, he also plays clarinet. Prior to a football game at the warm-up area, he called me as I was about to head to the game, saying that someone in his section had a problem with their instrument. So did I have a loner? Now, the thing about being a clarinet player is that everyone you know calls you every time they see a cheap plastic clarinet for sale at a garage sale or the like. So over the years, especially when my son was in junior and senior high, when I saw one of those for $50 or $100, I grabbed it. Didn't happen every day, but at the peak of my collection, I had a couple of beta plastic clarinets in addition to the pretty good wooden one my son played. And Lord knows that I wouldn't trust anyone with my good clarinets in the brass band or the one that I used in the orchestra. So I grabbed both of my plastic ones, which actually played okay, and I brought them. I pulled the one I thought was the better of the two out of the car and gave it to my son's friend. Meanwhile, he says, "Hey, another person ran into a problem, and I got the second clarinet out of the car." "How many clarinets do you have?" was my son's question. It was a proud moment. Injuring my dominant hand. As a kid, I had an irrational fear of having it chopped off. I spent all of grade 6 teaching myself to write and do stuff with my left hand. I made a conscious effort to remain as ambidextrous as possible. As an adult, I broke a few fingers on my dominant hand, but it wasn't a big issue because I could still do most things equally with my left hand. Anticlimactic, but it was useful. I bought and learned to use a Slim Jim, which opens locked cars. I carry one in my car, and I've been able to help no less than 10 people who've locked their keys in their car. My brother was visiting me from out of town, and he needed something from Target. He called me and said an elderly man had locked his keys in his car, and I was able to drive over and help. Also, I have jumper cables that have helped a few stranded drivers start their car. My goodness, I mean, good for you? But it's a little concerning that there's apparently a universally effective and commercially available product that can get cars open that easily. Does every carjacker know about it? Great to be prepared and have one in your garage, I guess, but don't go getting ideas, car thieves. Getting lost in a foreign country, relying on my phone's GPS to navigate, and the data stops working. I'd overprepared and memorized the map of the downtown area ahead of time. I'm basically blind without my glasses, and I've always taken a backup pair of glasses when I travel. It went untouched for years, taking up valuable space in my luggage. Lo and behold, one trip to Montreal a few years ago, and I just woke up one morning to find my glasses broken. No idea how it happened. And I finally got the chance to break out my backup pair. When I was 11, I always kept approximately 12 to 15 of some combination of pens, pencils, and markers in my pant pocket. I just liked having options and never knew what I was going to need to write on. Sometimes I got side-eye from other kids though. Cut 2, at a weekend camp with a bunch of kids. I'm participating in a sort of scavenger hunt race thing. At one point, our team hits this task where everyone has to draw or write something. I don't really remember. But there's only 2 pens, about 10 people per team, and another team just showed up. With 1 pen assigned to each team, it was going slowly until, you get a pen, you get a pen, everyone gets a pen. Our team screams through the task because we can all write simultaneously, while the other team's left plodding along with their 1 pen. We eventually win. Who's weird now? For those concerned about cheating, I do believe the lack of pens was oversight by the event planners, not a deliberate means of handicapping teams. There was a staff member monitoring that particular station and they didn't intervene. Our victory was sanctioned and still stands. Some other people have expressed concerns over the possibility of my getting impaled by all these writing utensils. Rest assured that this 100% has happened to me. I have absolutely impaled legs and fingertips multiple times. It's always terrible. Not me overthinking, but one time when my girlfriend and I were going to the gym, she packed me 2 spare shirts. I made a joke that it was unnecessary to bring 2, as it's not like I was going to explosively crap myself or something and ruin the spare shirt and need a second spare. We laughed it off, but she brought 2 anyway. After changing from my sweat-soaked shirt to a spare upon walking home, a bird craps all down me, ruining the shirt I was wearing. I was so thankful that she had brought an additional spare, so now I do not question the quantity of what she decides to bring anywhere. How did life totally change when you came out of a coma? I was in a coma for 2.5 months in 2015 when I was 27, following a serious car accident. When I woke up, I still had a tracheotomy and couldn't speak. I don't remember a darn thing from the time I was in a coma, but what blew my mind is when I woke up, my new boyfriend at the time was standing there with my parents and they were chatting to each other like they knew each other. I'm a very private person and had made every effort for them not to know of him, so I found this disturbing. I also had no recollection of the accident for months, and for a week or 2 after waking up, I had to be retold where I was and what had happened every time I dozed off and woke up. I had no idea where I was and thought I was 23, not 27, for months. I also had a really hard time recognizing faces. Like I'd see people who I knew, but I couldn't remember why or their names or anything. They'd just look familiar. One time, about a month after I'd woken up, my parents took me in the hospital bed for a walk in the courtyard of the hospital. We passed a large mirror in the lobby and I freaked out. I saw my reflection and I knew it was me because I recognized my parents pushing me, but I didn't recognize my own face. There were no injuries to my face or anything, I just didn't recognize myself. I was horrified because I had imagined myself much better looking because I had some pictures of me and my friends in my hospital room. In hindsight, it was probably just that I looked sickly and had no makeup and my hair was crazy. I also had the brain injury stare, which is hard to explain but basically a blank look in the eyes. I'd lost about 50 pounds while in the coma, not a diet I would recommend, because I had extensive bowel and stomach injuries, but oddly my face looked really puffy and fat. I also felt that I looked way younger than I was, and I found my forehead and cheeks were larger than I remembered. It also blew my mind that I'd gone into the coma in late winter, and there was quite a bit of snow on the ground, and when I woke up, it was spring and there was no snow. I had a large window in my hospital room. The news that shocked me the most was the fact that my parents had gone in and packed up my entire apartment. Like I mentioned, I was super private, and the idea that they went in there and boxed up all of my stuff and gave up my lease was hard to grasp. Obviously, it made sense, but I was still troubled by it. When I was a kid, I was messing around in our house that was under construction. I fell through the open floor to the floor below. My brother saw me land on my head and called 911. I woke up the next day watching TV and eating Teddy Grahams in the hospital. Then I don't remember anything until a few days later when I was at home. My parents said I was never unconscious because I was complaining the entire time and I was able to eat and use the restroom on my own. But I don't remember a thing. I'm now colorblind, where I have a hard time seeing green. It comes across as blue, gray, or brown most of the time. Yellow and purple are also hard for me. I didn't actually realize I was colorblind for a few years. I found out that the type that I have can be caused by head injuries. Cripes, I can't believe there are kinds of color that can be screwed up for you if you bonk your head hard enough. The CPUs inside our skulls really just are so intensely complicated. So I don't know if this counts because it was only 3 weeks, but I was so shaken when someone put on the TV and it was a newsreel about a festival in a town over. I wasn't even going to go. I just felt so weird because this was still like 3 weeks away in my head, you know? This can't be on TV. Did I just miss 3 whole weeks? Like, holy crap, what the hell happened? I was in a coma? Oh yeah, something bad happened to me. What was it that happened? Explosion? I'm not going to go into the details of the accident, but it was an explosion on the work floor that threw a piece of metal straight towards me. Tried to catch it in my arms and then my face. Didn't catch it. The wall did though, and it had a huge hole in it. Still don't know how I didn't die that day. It destroyed my upper and lower jaw, my arm, pinky, and burned most of my limbs. Mostly second-degree burns, so that wasn't really a problem. The problem was the jaws and the arms. My jaws were completely shattered into more than 100 pieces. The doctor told me he had to put pieces of bone in random places because he couldn't find the right spot they came from. I lost most of my teeth, about 3/4 of them. My lower lip was ripped off and was just hanging by one blood vessel and a few nerves. After 10 years, I still don't have all the feeling back, but that's the new normal, so I don't really notice anymore. And the arm was broken on the lower half. Both bones snapped like little trees, and one of the bones sticking out of a gaping wound. Fun times. My wife was in a medically induced coma, which is really just heavy sedatives and paralytics for 13 days. She had complications from a bilateral lung transplant. The hardest part for her was that she had very realistic dreams during where she went home and came back to the hospital. So the first few times they woke her up, reducing the medications to check for neurological function, she was fairly panicked. So I got into the habit of telling her the daytime and location each time they woke her, letting her know that she was safe. It was extra hard on her as she was on a ventilator and restrained, so she couldn't communicate what she wanted to know. Interestingly, we were often able to tell what part of the dream responded to different events of her stay in the ICU. That was in February. She still has to sometimes ask if things she remembers really happened or if they were part of the dreams. Good news, she's home now, nearly fully recovered with just some mild kidney problems that are getting better and some neuropathy in her left leg. She's able to walk with a walker and do a lot of things on her own again. So I'm not a coma patient, but when my husband came out of a long period of unconsciousness in the hospice, he thought that the footstool was a dog and kept patting it. We all played along and called it a good boy for the rest of the time there. Oh my god, when my sister ended up in the hospital with an accidental poisoning, it freaked the staff out that she kept thinking random things were animals. She wouldn't drink her water because it had fish in it, or she'd randomly start petting her pillow and calling it a cat. I didn't sweat it though. If her water had fish in it, I'd let them go in the sink and get her a new glass. I brought her a stuffed cat plush to pet. Luckily, she was only like that for 2 weeks and she doesn't remember any of it. Not me, but my niece was in a medically induced coma for 3 weeks after doing crystal and frying her heart. She says that she could remember hearing her mum and dad in the room during a couple of the points, and that her anesthesia was lightened at about 1 week in as an attempt to wake her up. She was aware of it but didn't become conscious. She said that it was like being underwater, so you can sort of hear what people are saying, but not fully understand. She was extremely surprised and confused when she finally came to, and couldn't believe that she was out for so long. The last thing she remembers was snorting what she thought was white snow and then her boyfriend calling 911. She's insanely lucky to be alive, but will live with the consequences of this for the rest of her life. She has permanent damage to her heart and will likely die if she does anything like that again. Does 3 weeks count as a long time? I was in a motorcycle accident and was out for 3 weeks. Woke up as the person I am today, not really as the person I was before, although I do have a few of his memories. I found out that my hippocampus was damaged, so that accounted for the memory loss. I woke up remembering a lot of school stuff and things I'd read before, but had a very hard time remembering or knowing people. Didn't totally recognize my dad, had no idea who my mum was. I was apparently dating a really pretty girl, but I have no idea who she was and no memory of her. We tried to make it work, but it was too weird and the old me was too different from the new me, and I felt no connection to her. I did become really good at philosophy and logic after I woke up and ended up going to college to study it. I've got a year left before I can lecture in it as well, so I guess that's a plus. It's still weird sometimes that people approach me and greet me. They know so much about me, but I have no idea who they are. I usually have to explain to them what happened, and things get a little weird sometimes, but I usually end up making or remaking a friend. I'll say that we've got a few comas that are in the ballpark of 3 weeks. Perhaps that's our standard factory reset setting, or the longest time that a hospital will put you on a induced coma. On a more serious note, we think of ourselves as so permanent and our souls as such a set thing, but my gosh, it feels like we can have major parts of ourselves rewritten by one bash to the head. Good for this guy and his newfound logical proficiencies. Good luck in your philosophy PhD, I guess. My grandpa's biggest shock waking from a coma was the news that he wasn't in Spain. He was hit by a car near his house in England, and a lot of the nurses in the ITU were Spanish, and he caught their accent and thought that sometimes they spoke to each other in Spanish. They weren't meant to, we don't care. He had excellent care anyway. And maybe when he started opening his eyes briefly, he saw their skin tone. He couldn't understand how he had got to Spain. When he was coming around, he was getting distressed. We kept telling him he was okay. He was in hospital and the tube was helping him breathe. We forgot to share the news of, "You have not left the country." He was also shocked to find his feet hadn't been amputated, his feet and ankles weren't injured, about the only bit of him which wasn't, but somehow, in the coma, he thought they were. When fully conscious, he was shocked at the football results. I was in a coma for about 3 or 4 days after an intentional OD on Ambien, regular antidepressants mixed with some alcohol. I was more or less just unconscious, but I remember the first time I woke up, it was exactly like those movies where you're flashing in and out, and there are disembodied voices everywhere and people working on you. It was very weird. I remember waking up a few times once I was out of critical condition, mainly to throw up from the Narcan. Apparently, I had a seizure, I had cyanosis, blood was coming out from my mouth and my nose, my blood sugar dropped below survivable, and then just shot up into diabetic coma zone after a glycerin shot. I was severely underweight, and I guess they didn't take that into account. I had a breathing tube for most of the time. When I woke up, all I knew was that my throat was very sore and my entire body felt like actual chewed-up garbage. Other than that, I had no clue what happened. I just remember taking everything and falling asleep, and that was that. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I can tell you that it isn't like you see in the movies. Nothing happens when you're in a coma. Your brain just shuts off. You know when you're little and you stay the night at a friend's house? When you wake up, you can't remember where you're at and you get nervous for a second until you remember? That's exactly what it feels like to wake up from a coma, but it never really clicks. I woke up from a 2-month coma after a bad wreck where I broke my neck, hip, and couldn't walk, among other things. I could tell I was in the hospital, but I didn't know why or what happened. For some reason, I thought I was 60 and I'd been in a comatose for 30 years. In fact, I'd been in a coma for 2 months and was in my late 20s. The doctors were amazed. I'd survived a 2-month coma, which is very unlikely, so this may be the longest period of time you'll get a legit answer for. But of course, people always have stories that are like, "My cousin was in a 3-year coma and said..." However, it's insanely rare that people will wake up after even months. 2 weeks because of swine flu. During this time, Oprah announced she was ending the Oprah Winfrey Show. I was very upset to learn this after the fact. Mostly because the TV running in my room, and the medication they had to give me to keep me under, gave the most cinematic dreams I've ever experienced. Somehow, the news of Oprah retiring filtered into my brain as dreaming about saving the whales with her in a submerged Chicago. We had a champagne brunch. It was excellent. I was also a superhero who could fly and fought my enemies on the rims of volcanoes. And then I woke up, and not only could I not fly, but my buddy Oprah had betrayed me into retirement. I was crushed. I don't know if 6 months counts as a long time in this context, but that's how long I was in a coma. The most shocking thing, naturally, was being told the date. The last date I remembered was sometime in September. I was being told it was March of the following year. I was in denial of this for several months, to the point of refusing to believe it was my birthday in the spring, and insisting that it must be Halloween, the only feasible holiday I could think of for roughly around the time I'd been awake, based on my last date that I knew. So my family had to tell me the cake they brought me was to celebrate Halloween instead of my birthday, otherwise I would freak out on them. Complicating this was the fact that I lost my sight in this ordeal, so it all seemed like some weird trippy dream for me, that I couldn't wake up from. I couldn't tell you when it finally sank in that the date was really 6 months beyond what I'd remembered, but it was a trip all the same. Not a coma, but an anesthesia experience. I remember waking up totally rigid down there, and tried standing up and almost fell over. The girl tried to catch me and I said, "I got this," and then I stumbled into the hallway and passed out. I wasn't in a coma, but I had a serious concussion. I woke up with no memory of anything at all. When things finally started coming back to me, a dog ran up to me and I started petting it. I looked at my dad and asked when we got this dog, because I didn't even remember getting him. Long story short, it wasn't our dog. My dad tells this story to his friends and says, "That's when I knew you were messed up." Maybe it's a me thing, but I would be very disappointed if I'd assumed the ownership of a cute doggo, and my family then informed me that it was not in fact our Poochie. My grief might even overtake that which I felt for my lost memories. I have epilepsy, and I've been in a brief coma due to dropping and knocking. I don't recall how long it was, or anything about it really, just what I'm told. I woke up really confused, and for some reason, the first thing I did was try to leave so I could, and I quote, "go home and smoke a J." The nurses explained what happened while stifling laughter. I tried to walk out even though I had all sorts of crap hooked up to me though. Didn't even notice that stuff. I pulled all-nighters when I was 15 or so, and I decided to see how long I could go while on spring break. I stayed up around 5 days, but the 5th day I crashed and I don't even know when, and I slept on the couch and woke up feeling kinda groggy, mostly hungry and thirsty. I wasn't surprised though, as all-nighters can do that to you, just one will. And according to my family, I slept for about 32 hours and got up to pee twice, and I don't remember. After the 24-hour mark, my mum almost took me to the hospital, but she knew what I did, so she left me be. You end up so confused about the time and the day of the week as well. I didn't realize how hungry I was until I ate, and then it hurt like I was starving. I drank a lot of Gatorade to rehydrate after that. Since I'm getting a lot of questions asking about hallucinations or you guys sharing your own stories, and oh my god, are some of those weird. By the end of my all-nighter bender, I was having conversations that didn't actually happen and all sorts of crap just out of sight and auditory, which was hell considering I also have tinnitus and the constant ringing along with all of it isn't fun. Around the 4th day I was getting it, and from there it got worse. It probably didn't help that my diet during this was canned beans and iced tea. I don't even want to think about how that probably hurt my insides like my liver. All the things I thought I heard or saw helped me understand a little bit of what my uncle goes through with his severe schizophrenia, like voices, shadow people, and stuff like that. I woke up on a carriage with some other guys and one of them said to me, "Hey, you're finally awake." Honestly, I don't think you'll find many, if any, real replies from the ones who've been under longer than a few weeks for this. The truth is, people who've been in a coma for a long time wake up brain damaged. The trope of waking up after years of being in a coma and being okay is just not something that happens in real life. Someone who's been in a coma for years will wake up a vegetable. I was flying a plane and crashed in 1944. I woke up in 2011 and joined the Avengers and fought aliens. So what shocked me was the aliens. I understood that reference. I woke up after a 3-day coma to my dad sitting at the edge of my bed. The first thing he said was, "Oh, thank God you're awake. I didn't know when you were going to come around." I used to be a cop, but I was shot on duty. The surgeons saved my life, but I slipped into a coma. When I woke up a few months later, my wife had dumped me on minimum care and took off to hook up with my old partner and had taken my son with her. I had to travel cross-country to even find them. When I did, there was an altercation between me and my old partner that ended when my son shot him. Thanks, Carl. Wasn't for a long time. I was overdosed on anesthesia after an ingrown toenail operation. I slept for over 24 hours. Was just gone. But as I first passed out on the way home from the operation, my parents decided to just carry me to my room and let me sleep. Came up and checked on me as I seemed fine, they just let me be. I got put under for the operation before lunch the first day. Fell asleep in the car ride home. I was gone that full day till the next day late at night. So maybe 30 to 36 hours or so. But yeah, waking up, not remembering anything and thinking you've just been gone for like a few minutes. But it's dark when you wake up, and as you get downstairs, they tell you you've been out for pretty much 2 days. Like, you felt fine, but everything just felt wrong as well. Your body and mind are just confused. It was weird, not something that I hope to experience again. Yeah, granted, it was not a coma, only a trip to Albania. It was quite similar. I was there for 6 months in 2013, and when I returned, I was told that there'd been 3 Australian Prime Ministers while I was gone. Half my family and a few friends legitimately thought I'd passed away due to a poorly worded Facebook post. Day after the hospital discharged me, I found my Instagram and Facebook flooded with people mourning or apologizing. I was in a coma for 2 months the year the Patriots went undefeated but lost to the Giants in the Super Bowl, and that blew me away. It was also super emotional because watching football was something I did with my dad, and when we watched a game together, he broke down telling me how he thought we were never going to get to see another game together. In 2003, I was in a high-speed rollover and as a result spent a few days in a coma. When I woke, I was shocked to find myself in a hospital. I called my mum and asked her if she could bring me a cigarette. She told me that she couldn't, I'd totaled our van, and I asked if she could just walk over, we lived close to our local hospital, but she told me that I was in Denver, that they'd had to flight for life me there. It was very distressing to me, both my location and that I'd rolled our van. She told me that she'd be there as soon as my dad got back to the house. Even after talking to my folks and the doctors, it was very hard to process what had happened. To this day, I only have extremely faint memories of looking at the clocks on the dashboard and zero recollection of roughly a week's worth of time preceding it. Literally just a blank spot in my memory that's still very uncomfortable for me. Apparently, I'd actually woken up a day or 2 earlier than I can remember, had already seen my folks and answered questions from both the doctors and police officers. I can't remember any of that either. What is the most pathetic GoFundMe or Kickstarter that you've ever seen? There are 2 that are tied for me. Help! I committed a hit and run, was found, and also ticketed for driving without a license and insurance. I can't afford these tickets because I don't have a job and I'm only 16. The other one was, please help fund my lawyer to get my daughters back after I lost them due to neglect and my substance habit. Basically, both of these equate to, help! I messed up bad and committed a crime. Pay to help me. I know a couple who did a GoFundMe for their wedding, and then they eloped. It's the 1-year anniversary of their eloping, and they're posting about it on Facebook like they didn't up and run away with their friends and family's money. Frickin' jerks. A guy I knew made a GoFundMe asking for $5,000 to move out to LA to attempt to become a famous artist. Kickstarter is one thing, at least those offer incentives in return. This guy was straight up just asking for money to fund his lifestyle because he has zero initiative to save money for himself and parties it all away. $40 was the extent of the donations. The page was quietly removed a few weeks later. A girl in my town did one because she wanted a vajazzle, and her mum wouldn't give her the money for one. That very briefly went viral before it was taken down. Please pay for my honeymoon. We never got a honeymoon because we couldn't afford it. Please pay for us to take a late honeymoon. Same couple, 2 fundraisers. See, my brother-in-law and his wife asked for monetary donations towards their honeymoon in lieu of wedding gifts. I find this acceptable, but it was also extended to only those invited to the wedding, so probably really not the same thing. Definitely that lady who spent literally all her money buying lottery tickets because she was confident she'd win, then started a GoFundMe to get back on her feet. It was thousands and thousands of bucks if I remember correctly. I think the fundraising site shut it down. See, these are pathetic, but at least we can laugh at these. The narrator was fairly sure that this video would be filled with people writing about the ones where people use GoFundMe to pay their medical bills, which to be clear, isn't pathetic for them to do, as crippling medical debt can happen to anyone in the States at any time. What's pathetic is the system that lets it happen. Oh my god, the following post comes to mind. I recently lost someone very dear to me, and before I did, they had said that when they would, they could get me a new Nintendo 3DS, or at least help me to get one if I ended up with some money of my own. So now I would like your guys' help since she can no longer do, so I have found one that I would love to get, but it's a little pricey, so in her memory, please help me get this so I can honor her and what she wanted to do, thank you. By the way, there were no full stops in any of that. What the heck?
It seems like they're more upset that their friend didn't get a chance to buy them the 3DS than they are that their friend actually died.
Friend of mine had a parent lose their job and consequently requested money for recreational purposes because she wanted to enjoy the college experience. Normally, I would have chipped in, but her dad was a long-time executive at a big insurance company and she drove a new BMW as a high schooler. Not to mention she was going to college on a scholarship. I think she still pulled like $200. This is more in the analog world, but it's in the same kind of vein. My wife's cousin had a baby shower. The whole family bought her a boatload of stuff: walkers, car seat, stroller, all the standard expensive baby stuff. Well, after her baby was done with all of it, she sold it, probably for green herb money. Then she got preggers with her second child at age 19. She decided to hold a second baby shower. She was annoyed the entire family didn't just buy her all the expensive crap they'd already bought her over again. My sister posting one asking for money because she couldn't pay her rent because she can't hold a job down. She doesn't like to take responsibility for her actions and just expects everyone else to take care of her.
Help me with my gaming PC build.
They started a GoFundMe so they could quit work and stay home to tweet about professional wrestling. We popped out a bunch of kids and now we need a van.
Another favorite of mine is, I totaled my car, help me buy a newer, more luxurious one. Hey, I'm pretty, help me buy a Mac 'cause I want one.
A girl from my town started one in hopes of quitting her job and becoming a stay-at-home mum. I just saw two in the last week and one has made money and one hasn't yet. The first is this very attractive girl, her looks probably matter to the story, who posted a GoFundMe to get an extra $100 to help with her vacation. Her story was that she was a full-time nurse who struggles with a health condition and needs a break. She has enough for the trip that she's been saving for months for, but the extra $100 will help her cover some extra things. I checked it yesterday and she has almost $1,000. Someone donated $300 to her. The other is some kid who definitely smokes a lot of green herb, who wants $1,000 to buy music equipment for his crappy rap career. It was only posted this morning, but when I clicked, he had $20 donated to himself. He donated his own money towards it. Some woman whose standard coffee maker had broken and wanted money to buy a top-of-the-line Keurig. A guy who has money for mods on his automatic FRS and flaunts wads of cash on his Facebook, asking for a handout when his car got vandalized. I knew a girl who started a GoFundMe for a down payment on a house. Her justification was that she throws huge parties and everyone would come and party there. This girl I went to high school with's boyfriend was killed in a car accident a year or so ago. She started a GoFundMe for herself to pay rent and other expenses for her and their baby, by which I mean dog. They weren't married and she wasn't expected to pay any of the funeral costs. She was just trying to get free money because something bad happened.
Give us several $1,000s for our wedding.
When confronted, the girl said that she was being humble enough to ask for help when she needed it. Too bad she couldn't be humble enough to just get married at the courthouse. Definitely Zana Joshi's YouCare fundraiser. If you somehow don't know who she is, she's the lady who overreacted to a guy saying that his name was Humongous. She tried to make money because she was, quote, harassed by Humongous and wants to stop the patriarchy. What she got instead was a crap ton of $1 donations telling her how much of a sensitive piece of crap she was. A girl I knew a few years ago decided to quit her job and travel the world for a year. Racked up something like $30,000 in credit card debt and then started a GoFundMe to support her new freeing lifestyle. Wrote a whole diatribe about how important it is she not work and continue to live and travel doing nothing. I think it made like $200. It was so cringy to read. So to be clear, I think there is a line to be drawn in the sand with the whole boomer diatribe of young people expect to be paid for nothing. When it's directed towards these sort of people, who literally want something for nothing while they travel in luxury and tear up the atmosphere while being waited on hand and foot, it may have some value to the argument. Just stop directing it at people who take student loans or who've been laid off and need some unemployment benefits while they get back on their feet. Deal? A guy I went on one date with, the date happened around 2006, had the dumbest Kickstarter. Backstory, he's friends with a bunch of my friends. We were on a date with the sole reason being that we were both gay and our friends just knew we would like each other. I'm a non-detectable, straight-acting gay and he wasn't. Not to say he was over-the-top flamboyant, but you could tell. Not a bad thing, I've dated flamboyant dudes and they're fun. The date? During the first part of dinner, he wouldn't stop going on about how rich he was, how he owned a house, how much he liked me, and that he couldn't wait to get me home even though we'd never met before. He reached across the table and unbuttoned a button on my shirt. I wear them with the top 3 undone as is, and he told me he liked a hairy man. I'm hairy, by the way. And said he was ready for us to move in. Then he started asking me what positions I was into in the bedroom. Then he started loudly talking about his Johnson. It's rigid under the table. I hushed him only for him to show me it via photo on an old 2004 camera phone and asked what I would do with it. I gave him a, "Is this really the place for this discussion?" And he rebutted it with, "No, really, what would you do with it?" Our waiter, another gentleman, could tell I wasn't feeling it with this guy, thank God, and brought 2 separate checks. The cherry on top of the evening was when it came time for him to pay. He was upset that he had to pay for himself. I thanked him for the evening and got ready to head out. Then I remembered. He fricking drove us. Outside, he tried to start his car, but it wouldn't, so he threw rocks at it. I had to call my sister so she could jump his car. She came and asked if we needed a ride. He gave her a, "Nah, we got it from here," so she left, even though I was giving her the, "Don't you dare leave." From there, he was asking if I wanted to go home or if I'd rather come back to his place. I said, "Home please, I'm kind of tired." He took the long way, then pulled off the side of the road and confronted me about how weird I was at dinner. I told him it was strange how he went from being a pretty nice guy to basically making me feel more uncomfortable than I've ever felt in my life in a restaurant full of people. I was looking out my window while talking to him and I had no idea how I didn't hear this, but he had unzipped his fly. When I turned back to him, the fricking Washington Monument was just standing straight up. "What about just 1 or 2 licks and we can keep driving?" I was fricking done. I told him off. He drove me the rest of the way home, with it still out, by the way, one hand on it and the other on the steering wheel, making a pouty face when I would look over. We got to my street, I asked him to delete my number. In short, worst date ever, one of the most uncomfortable nights of my life, and all by a guy claiming to come from money and talking about his posh lifestyle and huge apartment. Also, he pulled it out and got pouty because I wasn't overcome with lust at the sight of it. But anyway, here's his Kickstarter. About 3 years ago, my sister linked me to a Kickstarter. "Isn't this that guy you hated after meeting one time?" His Kickstarter was basically, "Help me pay my rent, pay off my car, I'm saving to get married to my girlfriend of 10 years, or some crap like that. The best part was also that he stated he had cancer on his twig and berries and he couldn't afford treatment. What happened to the house you owned at 25? What happened to the car that you owned? Which was still on his Facebook photos, by the way. You have a girlfriend? Johnson cancer? What? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. There was a day-old account over on the Tuber Reddit that asked everyone on the sub to review his post on Kickstarter. Always happy to help another tuba player, I checked it out. Maybe he was starting some kind of organization for tubists. Maybe he was helping kids, who knew? It was literally a guy who played in high school asking people to buy him a tuba, a new $9,000 tuba at that. The members of the sub were not very impressed, and the original poster quickly deleted the thread and the Kickstarter afterwards. "I want something I can't afford. Will you get it for me?" There was a Kickstarter for an indie comic series I found through Reddit delusional artists called Full Stop, The Fall of All. It was like looking at a 14-year-old DeviantArt member trapped in a 30-year-old man's body who couldn't see how bizarre his setup was, how crude his drawings and writing were, and just how unmarketable his entire venture was. If you've spent nearly 2 decades trying to get the same darn story off the ground, then, like what an aviation engineer said to the inventor of the brick-based airship, this crap won't fly. So the setup was 2 gods make a bunch of powerful weapons and leave them lying around for some reason. They then build a creature to guard them, but give him a black hole for a heart for some reason again. This is bad and will destroy the universe for some reason. They send him down to live as a bald eagle. This is a furry comic, by the way. But his black hole will drive him insane and he only has a year to live. Suddenly, mysterious good guys want to kill him to save the universe, and really stupid bad guys want to kill him so they can destroy the universe. He somehow has a magic katana that has a samurai ghost inside, and the ghost speaks Shakespearean English. There's now another Kickstarter for this crap. They want to make a video game. They're promising it will lift features from Undertale. Somehow, this got funded. Well, regardless of how harsh this author's words about the creator's talent is, pretty harsh in the narrator's book, the narrator decided to check up both on the novel and the game. The novel never achieved funding, which the artist is hardly to blame for, but the game was under development for 3 years, released a demo of sorts, and then after one final update saying the pandemic was going to slow down production, they disappeared completely. Which honestly is fairly typical for a Kickstarter project. Oh well. When I was a film major, one of my film professors started a Kickstarter campaign for a zombie film app called Zombie Map. I'm pretty sure most of the contributions were from film students who feel committed to support him because it was a crappy idea for a lot of money. The idea of the app is that filmmakers can make film or zombie movies or short films and upload it on the app. The app acts like a GPS. If you click on an area with an outbreak, then you get to see movies that are set in that area. It never achieved its goal, but honestly, it was pretty close. This couple made one to have people pay them to meet. It was a long-distance relationship. Even worse was that they were known for breaking up frequently and had already made 2 GoFundMe posts about the same thing. I think the worst of all was that they actually made a decent amount of money each time. Me and my girlfriend are moving to Chicago. Everyone give us money for rent. No. An in-law of mine is dying of COPD. She never stopped smoking, even though her initial diagnosis was 10 years ago. So far, $1,300 has been donated so her husband can quit work to take care of her. A job her daughter is already doing. Thinking about the whole situation just upsets me. I have a friend who's kinda cute, but she's got nothing going on chest-wise. She started a GoFundMe for a chest job, and people donate because she's cute. Oh, I don't think it's up anymore, but my best friend went to jail and met this trick named Tricky Nikki. Tricky Nikki is a serious pillhead, and after she got out of jail, Tricky Nikki got into a huge fight outside of a club over a guy or something. Tricky Nikki set up a GoFundMe with a sob story of boo-hoo, I was mugged on my way to Bible study, cause she is on paper still, so that was her official story. Well, she made $50, then someone ratted on her all over Facebook, and then the Snapchat video was leaked. They sent to her local police department, and now Tricky Nikki is in prison for 3 more years. Facebook drama is truly the best thing to watch from a distance. I volunteered as a teacher in Fiji. Another chick who was going in the same group as I was started a GoFundMe for herself, asking people to pay for her expenses. It was bad enough that she volunteered, yet wanted others to pay for her to do it, and then she shared it in the volunteer group with us, saying, "Please help out," smiley face. The Potato Salad Kickstarter, which raised $55,000 whilst promising people a bite. I was thinking of this one. Total props to the guy because he took his internet fame and did fun stuff afterwards. Semi-famous or even famous musicians setting up GoFundMe pages to fund the production of a new album. Pay for me to make this album. If it flops, I won't be out any money, and if it gets popular, I'll rake in the cash. I can kind of understand this with lower to mid-level artists, sort of buy the album before it's made kind of thing. One of my favorite bands has done this a couple of times, and they'll never get big record or company money or have hits, so having the fans directly support them is kind of cool. Usually, a higher contribution might get you the album and a t-shirt or signed merch, so that's a nice option. Some bands will never sell enough to rake in the cash, but still want to produce music. Someone like Beyoncé or Taylor Swift has no business doing this, though. This one guy wanted to take his girlfriend to EDC for their 1-year anniversary. He was asking around $700 for tickets alone. People roasted him and told him to get a job. He hadn't even considered hotel, airfare, or food, among other things. Shenmue 3. While the project itself probably isn't the kind of thing you think of when someone says pathetic, and it's certainly not, but the fact that this is a Kickstarter backed and publicized by Sony. Frickin' Sony put center stage during their E3 presentation with their own exclusive time slot. What the frick? I'm sure Sony were very unsure about the project when they decided to do that. The idea of Sony, one of the largest publishers in the world, if not the largest, asking fans to fund development of a critically acclaimed classic series, it's just obscene. And the most pathetic part is that it was fully backed almost instantly. Really, I'm just waiting for Activision to kickstart a Call of Duty title. That's the only thing left that could really outdo this. I had the greatest idea for a Kickstarter, then I realized it would have fit this category that we're talking about in the video. 1. Project is to develop a time machine. 2. Hire someone to go back in time, they must bring their own weapons. 3. They go back in time to just before Jesus' birth. 4. They record and document what the frick actually happened with him. 5. They hide the tapes in a secret location and never reveal their identities or any of what they've done so as to not upset the timeline. 6. In 2020, we go to the location and recover the tapes. 7. Everyone who contributed gets a copy of the tape. The problem is finding some kind of digital media which would keep the recording that long, which I don't think exists. Yes, sure. The final problem is the only problem with this entire Kickstarter idea. The rest is completely reasonable and doable. I kind of wish that I had seen something like this in the days when I actually donated to Kickstarters. It's pretty great. Any Kickstarter asking for people to pay for their backpacking trip to Thailand or something to help them discover themselves. Someone from my high school started one to pay for college tuition. In the end, she had to suck it up and go into debt like the rest of us. Some guy I didn't know very well set up a Kickstarter in my name to buy me a new car because mine broke down every few weeks. I appreciated it, but it also made me kinda want to die. Some completely random guy posted about wanting to quit his job and become a full-time YouTube Let's Player. He wanted $5,000 to get started. He got a whopping $5, and you gotta think it was a friend who felt bad for him, or even just the guy donating to himself from another account. My old high school boyfriend started a GoFundMe for his second divorce. I can't find the link, but I remember seeing a GoFundMe on my Twitter timeline about this white girl who raised a lot of money because her parents didn't approve of her dating a black dude and going to prom together. Not really pathetic, but they raised a crap ton just for prom tickets. My cousin started a GoFundMe to buy dresses for a pageant. She then complained on Facebook the day after creating it that her friends and family liked her post with the GoFundMe link, but didn't donate. Meanwhile, she's 24, hasn't held down a job for longer than 3 months, and has dropped out of 3 colleges. Recently helped her with her resume, but she told me she couldn't apply to jobs because she couldn't afford a laptop. Girl I know who updated her Facebook all the time, complaining about welfare and how she works hard for her money and supports her kids, unlike all the people mooching off the system. She started a Kickstarter to get a new apartment because there wasn't enough space for her kids and they'd run into some issues that were keeping them stuck in a cycle of not having enough money. First 5 or so comments were all saying variations of, "Gee, if only there was some kind of system to help people out of these situations so people's lives don't get ruined by cycles of poverty." It came across as so stupid because she was so vocal for years, just because she had never run into hard times as a stay-at-home mum. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.